How are you feeling? How long have you been here?
3 months, May 17th.
And what brought you?
That's difficult to answer.
Eventually resulted in your being here in the hospital.
That's difficult to answer.
is the end. There's a noise inside my head of crying people facing death. Is this the end? Is this the end? I'm burning in the dystopia. There's no place to hide. I'm burning in the dystopia. This is the final genocide. What have we done to the world? What have we done to the world? I'm burning in dystopia. There's no place to hide. I'm burning in dystopia. This is the final
Und weil der Mensch ein Mensch ist, drum braucht er was zum Essen, bitte sehr. Es macht ihn ein Geschwätz nicht satt, das schafft kein Essen her. Drum links, zwei, drei, drum links, zwei, drei, wo dein Platz genossen ist, weil ich ein Genialwalter einweist und weil du auch ein Arbeiter bist. Und weil der Mensch ein Mensch ist, drum hat der Stiefel im Gesicht nicht gern. Er will unter sich keinen Sklaven sehen und über sich keinen Herrn. Drum links, zwei, drei, drum links, zwei, drei, und ein Platz genossen ist, weil ich ein Genialwalter einweist und weil du auch ein Arbeiter bist. Und weil der Prolet ein Prolet ist, drum wird ihn kein anderer befreien. Es kann die Befreiung der Arbeiter nur das Werk der Arbeiter sein. Drum links, zwei, drei, drum links, zwei, drei, und ein Platz genossen ist, weil ich kein Genialwalter einweist und weil du auch ein Arbeiter bist.
Здравствуйте, comrades. Welcome to Socialism Saturday. My camera was blinking there for a moment. I have no idea what happened. Hey, happy Saturday, guys. Socialism Saturday is when we watch the real far left, the farthest of the far left, the most dystopian of the dystopian. And when my microphone works and I can actually hear myself talk, yeah, I appear out of nowhere. Shalom. Exactly. Guys, Socialism Saturday is when we watch the real radical revolutionary socialist left in America. If you want to know where every crazy idea in the United States comes from today, it is the people we watch on Socialism Saturday. If you want to know where critical race theory and anti-racist education in schools comes from, it's the people we watch on Socialism Saturday. If you want to know where gender ideology comes from, queer ideology, transing and queering kids, drag queen story hour, it is the people now I can hear myself. It is the people we watch on Socialism Saturday. If you want to know where environmental justice, climate change activism comes from, it's the people we watch on Socialism Saturday. If you want to know where the Free Palestine movement comes from, the riots going on in Los Angeles, the college encampments, it is the people we watch on Socialism Saturday. And my dog is very upset because he knows that all of the crazy shit that's going on in the country right now is a result of the radical revolutionary far left in America. This all has an origin point, and that is what we watch when we watch Socialism Saturday, because we don't go back. I cannot believe my husband is not silencing my dog. His dog. See, that's the thing. It's his dog. And he lets his dog get away with anything. If it was my dog, I'd be if my dog hadn't died, I'd be yelling at the dog to shut up. But no, it's his dog. So he has to discipline the dog in the way that he feels appropriate, I guess. Anyway, hey, bro, I'm not having your bullshit on the stream. See, this guy is obviously a socialist. This guy has been whining and complaining in the stream the entire time. He's been whining in the chat over and over and over again. Bro, I'm not having it. I don't care. We don't care about your gaslighting. We know exactly what you idiots believe. You believe that no one should own private property and that everyone should have access to the land, which throughout history has a long and storied, past of leading to a lot of starvation and death. Because every time socialists control things like land and housing and the food supply, people end up starving. I wonder why. I don't give a flying fuck. I don't give a Do you think we even use words like that? The only people who even use words like that are retards on YouTube. We aren't watching YouTube socialists, you retarded fucking moron. Perhaps you should sit back and listen before you start running your mouth, because you know what, bro? You look really stupid to us. You look really, really fucking stupid to us. So because you will not shut up, you're getting put in a timeout. If you still insist on mucking up my chat with your bullshit, you will be removed. That's just the way it goes. Just the way it goes. All right. So, see, I'm already yelling. It's been a weird week, okay? You have to forgive me. It has been a really, really weird week. So, what we're doing today, yeah, Ray over on Rumble said, dude is fake, like his name. So true. So true, Ray. So what we're doing today on Socialism Saturday. What is a tanky? A tanky is a word that YouTubers use to describe socialists that they don't like. It's considered a slur. The reason we don't care what a tanky is and the reason we don't use that word is that real far left activists never use the word tanky. Like, we listen to the real far left all the time. Have you guys ever heard an actual far left activist use the term tanky? No. You hear retards like Hassan Piker and Vosh using that term. No one else uses that term. Maybe like the people associated with the American Communist Party, they might use that term every once in a while. But like that again isn't a real, it's not a real thing on the far left. No one has ever used that term in the real trainings that we've been watching. And so we don't use that term because it's not real. It's just YouTube bullshit. Hey, thanks, Gothic. My late contribution for the Socialism Conference, it was mind-blowing. Thank you. Well, I appreciate that. Hopefully we have some more mind-blowing stuff this week. Let me just add that to our super chat goal. Guys, I do have a nominal $100 super chat goal for every Socialism Saturday. If you want to show your appreciation by contributing to the Karlyn Streaming on the Internet Teaching Us About Socialism Fund, please feel free to throw in $5, $10, $20, $100, $500 if you really want to, and contribute to the super chat goal. Now, don't think you can't send me more than $100. You totally can. It's fine. But that is what I have as a goal for us every Saturday. And I'll tell you, the sooner that we hit that goal, the happier I'm going to be throughout the rest of the stream. The more super chats that get sent in, the less I will yell at people. I promise. So, I found a YouTube channel that apparently had an event 3 years ago. So the content that we're going to be watching tonight is about 3 years old, but that's okay because I think the content's going to be really good for introducing new people to different types of socialist ideas. And this is on a random YouTube channel called the Revolutionary Socialist Organizing Project. Now, the reason this got my attention is in this presentation right here, Revolutionary Abolitionism, Defunding the Police, etc., etc., etc. That's Brian Bean. We know Brian Bean. We have watched Brian Bean on this channel before. We watched Brian Bean at the Socialism Conference last week. We also watched Brian Bean separately talking about literally overthrowing the government. So I know that Brian Bean is a legit socialist activist. He is very well known. And so that was where I started when I was looking at this YouTube channel. I was like, okay, they've got Brian Bean on here, so that is some kind of that's credibility. I know that this is the real far left then, if they know who he is. And so then I was looking at some of their other presentations, and honestly, there's like 9 videos on this YouTube channel. We're not going to watch all of them, but we are going to watch some of them. Hey, thanks, Murphy's Pool. You like it when I yell at people? I love it when people like it when I yell at people. It's so much easier that people, some people understand. Here's the reality. Some people understand the yelling and some people don't understand the yelling. And that's just the way it goes. Some people, they get their feelings all in a twist. Some people are like, yeah, rip that guy a new asshole because he's being a retard on the internet. And I know that I work out the feelings for some people who maybe wish they could yell on the internet, but they can't for whatever reason. And so, you know what? Embrace the yelling. The yelling is never going away. Sometimes people say to me, they're like, Karlyn, maybe you should be nicer to people. And then sometimes I really do try. I feel like I've been on pretty good behavior lately. Sometimes I really do try to not yell at people, but sometimes yelling is necessary and bullying is necessary because people on the internet, wouldn't you know it, sometimes they don't just want to shut the fuck up and listen to what's going on. They just want to run their mouths constantly, and they want to say things that don't even make sense, and they want to say things that are unhinged from reality, but they just keep talking. They don't listen to what anyone else around them is saying. They don't listen to me. They don't listen to people in the chat. And when that happens, we need to beat them upside the head to get them to stop. We need to yell. We need to bully. We need to shame. We need to haze them. Because my community is not an inclusive community. To be very clear, my community is not an inclusive community. We are an exclusive community. There is no low IQ retardia bullshit. There is no conservative narrative. There is no my best friend said XYZ about socialism, or I heard Glenn Beck say that thing, or Mark Levin wrote that book that time. I don't give a fuck. The only thing that we care about is what the far left is doing in the real world, what they are saying in the real world, what they're doing in the real world, what they are teaching to other people in the real world. I don't care about that socialist essay you read in college. I care if the far left is currently teaching that essay in the world today. Because if the far left isn't teaching that essay that you read in college that time, then it is not relevant to what the far left is currently doing in America today. And that is what we care about. And sometimes people need to get yelled at. And I hope I yell with love because I really do want you to learn and I want you to be successful and I want you to be here with us. But if you're going to run away crying like a little girl because you got your feelings hurt on the internet, you know what? Maybe you don't belong here. Go back to the Daily Wire. Go back to Fox News. It's fine. When are we going on a socialism field trip? What socialism field trip do you want? I mean, this is kind of like a socialism field trip, isn't it? Thanks for the super chat. I appreciate it. Hang on, let me add that to the total. Anyway, so I found this YouTube channel that has all this great socialism stuff on it. And so we're going to watch several of these presentations, and there are a bunch that I think are going to be really good. I think this is going to be a really good night for new people, to be honest, for people who maybe you haven't watched as much socialism and you're just getting into some of these topics, because I get the sense from what I've seen, this is like a conference. So at conferences, what they're trying to do is recruit and radicalize more people to their point of view. They're trying to explain what they believe a little bit more. And so you're going to hear directly from the far left what they believe on a variety of topics. So the ones I want to watch are this one right here, the dead end of socialist reformism. The dead end of socialist reformism is essentially going to say there are two types of socialists. There are reformers and there are revolutionaries. Reformers still want to work within the electoral process. Revolutionaries do not want to work within the electoral process. They just want to overthrow the government. So what that first presentation is going to say is those DSA types, that's all nice and cute. It's nice and cute that they want to run in elections. It's nice and cute that they want to get elected mayor of New York City, but we don't actually think that's going to change anything, and here's why. So basically in this presentation, they're going to explain to you why they don't believe in the electoral process and why they believe instead they want to violently overthrow the federal government, because that is the goal. They do want to violently overthrow the federal government because they believe the federal government is grounded in capitalism. They believe the Constitution is a capitalist document. So that's what that first presentation is going to be about, and I think it's going to be really great to watch. Tayton, good to see you. You always have my support, even though I'm rarely here. Love you all. Thank you, Tayton. We appreciate you showing up. It's okay that you don't show up every time. We forgive you. It's fine. So that's going to be presentation number 1. Presentation number 2, I think, is going to be this one, which is Unite and Fight the Right, Politics and Methods for Organizing Against Fascism, because that's just good old fun. It's just good old fun to hear socialists talk about how they're fighting fascism and the evil right-wingers. And so that's what we're going to watch next. And then this one, I swear we've seen this one before. Reagan, do you recognize this? I swear we've seen this one before. I know we've seen this person somewhere before. I feel like this person is like a Tempest Collective person that we've seen. I'm almost positive of it. But this is called Liberation for All, Bodily Autonomy, Abortion Rights, and Trans Justice. So that's going to be a crazy presentation. Yeah, that guy's familiar, right? I know we've seen it before. I just don't remember. I don't remember if we watched that presentation or if we watched that person in a different presentation. But we've definitely watched them before. Yep. And then if we still want to keep going, we're going to watch Brian Bean, I think, to close it out. So I basically have 4 episodes that I've picked out for us to watch today. I think that's manageable. This one's 45 minutes. This one is 47 minutes. This one is 40 minutes. This one is almost 40 minutes. So I think that is like a manageable amount of episodes. Socialism Saturday is usually a long form show. And so we can watch a whole bunch of stuff. So we've got a nice little marathon. And again, this is going to be great for new people. So if you are new to socialism, if you haven't watched socialism with me before, let us know in the chat that you're new. That actually really does help us out, because when you first start watching socialism, it can be a little bit overwhelming and it can be a little bit confusing. And we want to help you learn. The thing that's most confusing when you first start watching socialism is that it sounds like they're speaking English, but they're not. They're speaking a different language. It's called socialist. It might sound like something that you recognize, but they have completely different meanings of the terms that they use. And so you have to be aware, how are they defining the terms? How are they defining things like capitalism? How are they defining things like white supremacy? Because it might not be exactly what you think it is. Zero Carb Zen, my Kevin Michael account has been muted. I don't know what happened there, Kevin Michael. I will look into that. So yeah, I don't know what happened. I don't recall muting you. So I will look into it. Thank you for the super chat. We will get that fixed per usual. Appreciate it. All right, so we're going to get into that real soon, guys. I just have a couple quick announcements to make. If you appreciate the work I do exposing and educating people on the radical revolutionary far left, please make sure you sign up on my Substack. That is Karlyn, Karlyn.substack.com. You can sign up for free if you just want free email updates. I post clips over there. I do live streams over there that are exclusive to that platform. I post breakdowns of the far left. Actually, yesterday, in case you missed it, I posted Antifa's zine yesterday. Antifa wrote a zine on how to occupy a building. So if you guys want to learn how to do illegal things like break into a building and stake it out and cut all the alarms and learn how to identify the different types of alarms and learn how to use a crowbar in multiple ways and learn how to basically take apart a deadbolt lock. And you want to learn how to do all of those things. Antifa will teach you. This is part of the zine stockpile that I got when I went to Boston last month, and I've just gotten around to breaking this one down. And there's lots of useful information in the Antifa Do-It-Yourself Occupation Guide. And I think it's kind of interesting because one of the things that we can do is we can read what's in these documents and we can see very clearly. Actually, there's a part I want to show you guys. Where is it? Where is it? Hang on. Oh, check this out. Okay, so it's on this page right here. It's on page 9 in the document. Here's what it said. So when they are occupying a building, when you're occupying a building, share everything. Inside the occupation, there is no private property. Break down barriers. Inside, social status and jobs are meaningless. Vandalism. Occupying a space removes the space from the capitalist landscape. A group may decide it is better to destroy or vandalize a space than return it to its usual role in good condition. The role of vandalism may be different in each situation, but it should not be disowned outright. So those are the kinds of tidbits that you can find in the Antifa Do-It-Yourself Occupation Manual. And that is currently on the Substack. And, you know, you're going to learn how to do illegal stuff if you read this. And don't do that. The reason I'm showing this to you is not to teach you how to do illegal things. Don't do that. Disavow all illegal bullshit. I'm just showing you what Antifa is actually teaching to each other. And they updated this manual to make it a 2024 edition, specifically in response to the Columbia University encampments. So that tells you who was involved with the Columbia University encampments, the college encampments in general. And quite frankly, if you read this manual and then you watch a protest or you watch live video from one of the college encampments, or you watch any of these things where Antifa is doing something like trying to take over a building or lighting off fireworks or things like that, if you read this manual, you're going to see exactly where they're getting their ideas. And that's kind of interesting. So that is available over on the Substack right now. Again, that is Karlyn, KARLYN.substack.com. Also, I'm holding an event this coming week. We are doing an introductory class for new people who want to learn about the language of the far left a little more in depth. And so this is going to be a good intro class. It's going to be about 90 minutes long. It's totally free, but people have been asking for like an in-depth crash course for people who are new to my work, new to watching socialism with me. I will take you through about 90 minutes worth of like basic high-level information that you need to understand if you're going to understand the radical revolutionary far left. This event is totally free to sign up for. You can find the link over on the Substack. I will also put it in the chat right now. You can make a donation if you feel like it, but you don't have to. It's totally free. Please share it out with your friends. Please share it out with your community. And if you can't make the live presentation, that's totally fine. Just sign up for the recording and you will be sent a recording of it. Basically, as soon as the presentation is done, within a couple of hours. The video takes a little bit of a time to process, but the whole purpose of this is I want to have an on-demand presentation up where people can go and get a really quick crash course. And then if they want more information, they can find out more information at that point. So you can find that currently on the homepage of the Substack. And if you guys appreciate the work I do, please consider signing up for $8 a month, $80 a year. I am 100% funded by people like you to educate people about the radical revolutionary far left, to cover things that no one else on the internet is covering, to do common sense breakdowns where I don't have any political ideology or narrative. My only job is to show up and to show you the receipts and to tell you the truth and to let you decide what to do with that information. And so if you want to support the work I'm doing it on the Substack is the very best way to do it. All right, before we get into our show, we do have an educational video for people to watch to explain the rules of Socialism Saturday. Especially you new people, please pay attention, and then we will get started. All right, for anyone that's new, we have some rules for Socialism Saturday. Let me go over them real quick. Socialism Saturday is a research group and a class. We do take this seriously. You're allowed to have fun. You're allowed to have a drink or two. You're allowed to kind of kick back and joke in the chat. However, I need everyone to understand that when we are researching the radical revolutionary left, we do take this seriously. And so if you're shitposting in my chat, I'm going to tell you to stop. If you are posting off topic in the chat, I'm going to ask you to stop at some point because it's going to be distracting to what we're doing. I need you to think of yourself as in a classroom. And I'm not talking about an online classroom. I'm talking about a real life classroom, okay? When you walk into a real life classroom, I am the teacher, you are the students. You are sitting in the desk, I am sitting in the front of the classroom. I'm standing there teaching you what is going on. If you were in a real life classroom, you wouldn't walk in, start throwing shit at the wall, yelling, saying, I disagree with you because my best friend said something different. That's not allowed. I don't care about your feelings. I'm not going to coddle your opinion. And that's going to be the way it is. And if you don't like it, you don't have to be here. But if you are in my classroom, you will respect my rules and you will listen to me. And if you do not do that, then you will be removed. And how you feel about being removed makes no difference to me at all. The expectation is if you're going to be here and you're going to be watching socialism with us and you're going to be participating in the chat, you are doing it because you are serious about learning this topic and understanding this topic. The minute that I think that you're just fucking around or you're trolling or something like that, you're going to get put in a timeout or permanently banned, and that's just going to be the way it is. Rule number 2, don't be a dick. Do not insult me. Do not insult other people in the chat. I can do whatever I want because I am the queen fascist bitch of my YouTube channel. So I can say and do whatever I want. But if you don't insult me and you don't insult other people in the chat, we're not going to have a problem. So be an adult, rein that shit in. Number 3, no whining. I don't care about your feelings. I don't care if you feel personally attacked. It makes no difference to me at all. And I promise you, I care about your feelings a little bit more than the left does. So if you can't handle me, you can't handle the left. If you start whining and complaining because you don't like the rules or you think you're being treated unfairly, you can just leave, bro. There's the door. You don't have to be here. Number 4, listen. Our job here and why we do Socialism Saturday is to listen to what the left is saying, to listen to what real leftists are doing in the real world. This is not to support your confirmation bias. This is not to support any conservative bullshit narrative that you may have heard on Glenn Beck that one time. This is not to be what you want it to be. This is to engage with reality. We need to listen, we need to actively listen, and we need to understand the left better than they understand themselves. That is the purpose of this exercise, okay? As part of that, I do ask that people refrain from debunking. You do not have a single debunk in your arsenal about the left is stupid because of reasons X, Y, B, and Z, or the left is her hypocrites for reasons X, Y, B, and Z. You don't have a single debunk that we haven't heard before, okay? And every time you put energy into debunking, that is energy that you're not putting into listening. So if I see you debunking, I'm going to tell you to stop because you need to put that energy into listening instead. Lastly, break the rules of my chat or disrespect me in any way, and I'll just kick you out, and that's the way it is. All right, everyone, those are the rules for Socialism Saturday. It's real simple. Don't be a dick. No whining. If you have questions, ask them. Don't expect us to coddle your feelings. The only thing we care about on this channel is what the radical revolutionary far left is saying, what they're doing, what they're teaching in the real world. And the very first thing we're going to watch is this video. And this is all from the same YouTube channel. It's called, what is the name of this YouTube channel? Hang on. Revolutionary Socialist Organizing Project. The videos we're going to watch tonight are a little bit older. They're about 3 years old, but that's okay because nothing significant has changed in the last 3 years about what they believe on these topics. So they're still going to be telling you what they believe, but people might need to know that, like, if they're referencing things that happened 3 years ago in terms of just like current events, it might seem a little weird, but mostly they still believe exactly the same things today on these topics, and we'll make sure to point that stuff out when we need to so that people aren't confused. Of course, if you have questions, please do ask them in the chat. Questions are encouraged. Even my dog wants you to ask questions so that even if you think it's a dumb question, especially for new people, just make sure you ask it because if you have the question, other people probably do too. And we can't answer questions if we don't know that you have them, okay? So if you have questions about what the language means, if you have questions about why they said something a certain way, why they're looking at something a certain way, don't just make the statement. Don't say they're doing this for reason X, Y, B, and Z, because most of the time you're not going to be correct about that. Ask the question, why are they doing this? What do they mean by this? Because that way you're going to be more open to hearing the information. Okay, so the first thing we're going to watch is a presentation called The Dead End of Socialist Reformism. And what does this say? I'm going to make it bigger because I'm not wearing my glasses right now and I actually want to be able to read this. An independent Marxist historian and writer living in the greater Boston area. Oh, great. He's done a lot of stuff with Haymarket Books, the Democratic Socialists, blah, blah, blah. Doug will describe the politics of Michael Harrington, hope to transform democratic socialism from a marginal view into a major political force in the United States. To accomplish this, he advocated that socialists act as the left wing of the possible inside the Democratic Party in order to transform it into one that truly represented the people. In the end, realignment proved to be a dead end to advance socialist politics. So what this presentation again is about is, so on this channel, we listen to the far left. We are not listening to Democrats. Democrats are not communists. We are not listening to liberals. Liberals are not communists. We are not listening to progressives. We do sometimes during the week, but on Socialism Saturday, we do not listen to progressives because progressives are not communists. We are either listening to Democratic Socialists of America or the Working Families Party, which are going to be more DSA, like reformer types, or we are listening to real radical revolutionary leftists. There is a big difference between the DSA and the real radical revolutionary socialist left. The DSA believes they can achieve a post-capitalist society via elections. They can get elected to an office. They can make incremental changes in that office to push society towards a post-capitalist world. As a reminder, when the left says capitalism, they mean private property ownership. Private property means your ability to own a home, your ability to own land, your ability to own an apartment rental that you rent out as a landlord, your ability to own intellectual property, your ability to own a private business, whether that private business is big or small, and your parental rights are considered to be a form of private property because parental rights allow you to pass generational wealth from parent to child. So all of those things will be eliminated in the future post-capitalist world, but the Democratic Socialists of America and the reformers have a very different idea of how to get there than the revolutionary socialists do. So the reformers still want to work within the electoral system. And what this presentation is saying reformism doesn't work. It will not work to win elections. It will not work to try to take over the Democratic Party. It will not work within the current system because the current system is still a capitalist system, and therefore you aren't going to be able to overthrow capitalism by working within the capitalist system. Intellectual property is content. You write a book, you create a video, you create music, you create art. It's intellectual property. So when we're listening to the radical revolutionary far left, it's important to understand they do not participate in elections. People come onto the channel all the time and they're like, oh yeah, Karlyn, these people still vote for Democrats, right? No. Not only do they not vote for Democrats, they don't believe in working within the electoral system at all because they're planning on violently overthrowing the federal government in order to abolish capitalism because they believe the government of the United States is built on a capitalist system. So that's basically what this presentation is going to be about, and I want you guys to watch it, and I want you guys to hear it directly from them, because no one believes me when I say that these people don't vote for Democrats, but they're going to tell you they don't vote for Democrats, and they're going to tell you why. So let's dig into our first presentation, and it's going to be the dead end of socialist reformism. And I'm going to make the screen smaller again. And again, this was 3 years ago, so it was a while ago. Okay, so here. After that, I just want to point out, they've got AOC on their thumbnail. They don't like AOC. They don't like AOC now. They didn't like AOC 3 years ago. You're going to hear them say that.
Thank you to the organizers for inviting me today. I'm also the author of the person I'm going to be speaking about, A Failure Vision, Michael Harrington and the Limits of Democratic Socialism, which is a latest book on the founder of DSA, and a shameless plug.
Yeah, it's real simple. The unions are reformers. The unions are not revolutionaries. The unions are reformers. So it doesn't matter. The unions still believe in working within the electoral process. They're not revolutionaries. That's not what we're talking about right now.
I urge you to buy it because I'm going to be glossing over a lot of things just to kind of get at the essence of my talk. So Michael, I want to just start off with who Michael Harrington is. He is the founder of the Democratic Socialists of America, and he was actually the head of the Socialist Party of America and the founder of the Democratic Socialist Organizing Committee. And he was also a public intellectual, author of many books, most notably The Other America, which was a seminal work on poverty. And he also developed this theory called realignment. And I want to talk to you now a little about what realignment is. It is not something that he envisioned or originally invented, that actually came from other people he was associated with, but it's something he truly developed and refined into a strategy. And realignment was meant to answer the question, how can the United States reach socialism? And Harrington begins with this idea that in Western Europe, the working class has some form of independent political representation in a social democratic or a labor party. The Labor Party in Britain, the Socialist Party of France, et cetera, et cetera. And he says, well, what about the United States? And he believes that actually there is no mass socialist party here. And he's writing this and developing these ideas in the late 50s, early 60s. And he's like, well, yeah, we don't have a mass labor party, but we actually have a secret labor party. And that is formed by the trade unions, the American Federation of Labor and the Congress of Industrial Organization, the AFL-CIO.
What? The unions are a secret labor party. According to the founder of the DSA, the unions are a secret labor party. Wow. You don't say. What an interesting way to look at it. Again, we don't have a mass socialist party. We have the unions.
And he's writing this and developing these ideas in the late 50s, early 60s. And he's like, well, yeah, we don't have a mass labor party, but we actually have a secret labor party. And that is formed by the trade unions, the American Federation of Labor and the Congress of Industrial Organizations, or the AFL-CIO, when they were forged and united in 1955. So he believes people like Samuel Gompers, George Meany, notable labor bureaucrats and anti-communists were actually like these secret socialists pushing a progressive agenda, but they happen to be subsumed in the Democratic Party. And he believes also that after World War II, that there was this new class of technicians and professionals, and that they had the potential to be part of a new majority coalition. And Harrington looked to this new class, the labor bureaucracy, and the civil rights movement, that they would form a new majority that could transform America. But he believed that these elements of the new majority found their political expression in the Democratic Party. But the Democratic Party was controlled by racists and capitalists. So what Harrington wanted to do was
the Democratic Party was controlled by racists and capitalists, and so they weren't properly utilizing the unions to implement a socialist agenda.
Expression in the Democratic Party. But the Democratic Party was controlled by racists and capitalists. So what Harrington wanted to do was to realign or transform the Democratic Party. And he's very insistent that this is the only place where a political beginning can happen. So what does that mean? Well, it means taking all the racists and the capitalists from the Democratic Party, moving them to the Republican Party, and therefore the Democratic Party becomes basically the equivalent to the British Labour Party.
And they did exactly that. And they were called the classical liberals, and they were called the IDW, and they used to be in the Democrat Party, and then they were removed from the Democrat Party and pushed to the Republican Party, where now they are trying to drag the Republican Party over to the left because they're classical fucking liberals.
Or Swedish social democracy. And now that the parties have been transformed, the Democrats will institute a welfare state, and from that you will eventually get socialism.
Mm-hmm.
And how does he envision this happening aside from just a pious wish? Well, He believes that socialists and social democrats need to be inside the Democratic Party as an active constituency. They need to ally with liberals because he believes that the first step in realignment will be a new reinvigorated liberalism. But socialists, and this is, Harrington believes that socialists need to be strategic and realistic. He calls this the left wing of realism. So that means you can't alienate liberals, you can't do a lot of militant things in the streets, anything illegal. You got to stay strictly within legality and all of that. You really can't, be pro-communist in any sense. So anti-communism you have to accept. And all this anti-imperialism, that's kind of, well, you can't do that either, because again, this will alienate your liberal allies. So this is the basic vision of realignment, is to take these the progressive constituency, he says, that exists in the Democratic Party, make it the ruling faction of the Democratic Party, and that will lead to socialism. And Harrington, this is pretty much his political vision throughout his life. And I just want to now briefly kind of talk about how that actually worked. So this was actually, if you are a student of the 60s, you're no doubt familiar with Students for Democratic Society and the Pruitt-Huron Statement. You'll find the realignment vision there. And in 1964, Harrington first really put this into action with his support for Lyndon Baines Johnson in his election campaign. And he basically said, we need to support Johnson. We got to be realistic. It's not just the lesser evil, because obviously the Republicans are ultra right, they're racist, they're going to start a war, they might even start World War III. But if we support the Democrats, they're a bit more peace loving, they'll fight poverty, and they'll give the left space to organize. And he was right in a sense, because there was obviously.
So he's saying here, I want to make sure everyone understands what's going on. He's talking about in the 60s, they were basically like, okay, well, the Democrats, so this is the socialists and the communists. The socialists and the communists are like, okay, well, the Democrats are like marginally better than the Republicans. They don't love the Democrats, but they're marginally better. And what they thought is that if they got the Democrats elected, the real far left, the real socialists and communists would have space to organize. Like the Democrats would basically leave the far left alone. They wouldn't be breathing down their necks, and the far left could actually organize because they had just like this marginally better party. But what I want people to hear in this is, in the 60s, it wasn't even that they liked the Democrats. It wasn't that they thought the Democrats were advancing their agenda. They just thought that the Democrats were like marginally better than the Republicans, and the Democrats would leave them alone to basically let them do what they wanted to do. And the conclusion of this presentation is going to be that didn't work. And so he's going to explain why, but I want people to understand they started not liking the Democrats, but being like, okay, lesser of two evils, whatever. But that was in the 60s. And as a result of whatever happened, that didn't work. And now they resoundingly do not like the Democrats. That's where this presentation is going.
There was a war when from Johnson, who also did fight poverty, kind of. But the other part of this is there was, in 1964, a semi-expression of this new majority, and this was the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party, which was basically an action by civil rights activists in Mississippi to create an integrated, non-racist Democratic Party, because the state party itself was segregated, and they did voting drives.
When the far left was protesting outside the DNC, it was never to move the DNC policy. It was always to recruit and radicalize more people against the left. That was all against. It was to recruit and radicalize more people to join the far left. It was not to help the Democratic Party. It was not to move the Democratic. Listen, this is where I'm going to start yelling. And you've been around long enough, quite frankly, to know better. Everyone needs to get it through their fucking heads that the real socialists and communists never, literally throughout all history, never supported the Democratic Party. they may have played some lesser of two evils game where they were like, if we elect the Democrats, they'll leave us alone. That was a bet they were making in the 60s, and they later have completely changed their mind on that. There has never been a single moment, no matter how many Republicans scream it, no matter how many Republicans write books about it, no matter how many times Donald Trump posts on Truth Social, no matter how many times Elon Musk says it. It doesn't fucking matter. The Democrats and the socialists are not the same thing. They have never been on the same team. The Democrats have never been the useful idiots of the socialists. The socialists don't see it that way. And so everyone has got to accept this. If you don't accept this, you're going to keep going, but, Karlyn, I don't understand. The Democrats are socialists. The socialists are voting for the Democrats. And you're going to keep saying that over and over and over and over and over again. And I'm going to start to get really pissed off because they're telling you explicitly, in no uncertain terms, that Democrats are not socialists and socialists are not Democrats. And if you aren't going to listen to this and you aren't going to assimilate this information, there's the door. Run over to Fox News. They'll be happy to have you.
In Freedom Summer 1964, there was killings by the Klan, by the cops. And at the Democratic Convention that year, the Mississippi Freedom Party wanted their delegates seated because they, correctly assumed that they represented the majority. And they, the civil rights activists have been supported by labor unions, etc., and students as well. But the Democratic Party establishment gave them 2 seats and said, no, you got to get in line. And Harrington's comrades who were at the Democratic Convention, notably Bayard Rustin, said, you have to accept this compromise. No, we're not going to embarrass our Democratic Party allies. And Harrington, even though he wasn't there, he fully accepted that. So you get the election of Johnson in 1964, which again leads to the Vietnam War, etc. And Harrington is aghast at this, thinking that Johnson is just led astray. And in 1968, Harrington was looking very favorably on Robert F. Kennedy as an expression of realignment. Kennedy is killed. He supports pretty much every other Democratic candidate. He just lines up with Hubert Humphrey, even though he supports the war, but he's not Nixon. So there you go. I'm going to skip over 1972 because Harrington was involved in probably the weirdest political split on the American left when the Socialist Party was torn between supporting either George McGovern or Richard Nixon. And I will take you to after he leaves the Socialist Party in the mid-70s. He's involved in trying to transform the Democratic Party platform, and he pushes something called the Democratic Agenda, which is basically this kind of left liberal platform of like a reinvigorated New Deal and Great Society, a new welfare state, and it actually does get approved in the Democratic Party, and it is championed by Jimmy Carter, the party's nominee in 1976. And Harrington sees this great class struggle at the ballot box in 1976. The corporate class is for Gerald Ford, but the working class is for Jimmy Carter. So he really believes that this is a working class victory when Jimmy Carter is elected. And what happens when Jimmy Carter is elected? Well, that Democratic agenda ends up just being a meaningless piece of paper as Carter attacks unions, institutes what we would call Reaganism, kind of like these first springs. And Harrington himself is again aghast and upset at this. He's involved.
So what are they saying? We voted for Carter. We crossed our fingers. We thought that maybe Carter wouldn't be that bad, but no, Carter turned out to be a giant pile of something. We hated Carter. We didn't like anything he did. He totally fucked things up. So again, we're talking about going back to the 70s. The Democratic Party is still disappointing the communists and socialists because the Democratic Party is not doing the things they want them to do at all.
Involved in this toothless coalition called the Progressive Alliance, which just wants the Democrats to be nicer to them. It's, basically labor bureaucrats and progressive activists. So we have that. And another instance, happens in the 1980s. And this is actually probably the most substantial attempt at realignment in Harrington's lifetime, and this is called the Rainbow Coalition, led by Jesse Jackson. And the Rainbow Coalition includes civil rights activists, it includes labor unions, a lot of people who had come out of the new communist movement but were now social democrats were involved with this. And Jackson's campaign involved things that Harrington, or it involved basically a more robust pushing of like social welfare and a policy that was opposed to, say, interventions in Central America and the recognition of Palestine. And I should add that
Palestine,
Jackson,
80s.
even though he doesn't call himself a socialist, he's actually...
Again, I just want to acknowledge, he's telling us that the far left was focused on the recognition of Palestine in the 80s, okay? So it's not something that just happened after October 7th. The Free Palestine movement has been on the left forever. Hey, thanks, Ginny. I appreciate the super sticker.
Within the confines of the Democratic Party is far more left than, say, Bernie Sanders, since Jackson doesn't have a history of militarism. So this is this major attempt at realignment, or this kind of new majority. And Harrington, who at this point is leader of DSA in 1984, does not support it. He supports the lead of the AFL-CIO bureaucracy, which is supporting the campaign of Walter Mondale.
You have 5 minutes left.
Okay. So in 1988, there is another attempt at the Rainbow Coalition. Harrington supports it because Jackson has kind of moderated himself, but again, Jackson is defeated and Harrington is excited about the possibilities for the left under Michael Dukakis. He's the only one in the world who's excited at those possibilities.
Real.
Now, Harrington dies in 1989, and realignment actually is formally abandoned by DSA in the 90s. But since DSA is, the largest nominal socialist organization in the United States, that it still finds expression today in DSA with something called the surrogate party and the dirty break, which is basically we build up our forces in the Democratic Party, and theoretically at some point we will break from the party. But now to conclude this, just because I want to give time for the other speakers in discussion, is realignment. It presents itself as this serious strategic strategy. It's 33rd dimensional chess, when really it amounts to voting harder for the Democrats. There is nothing there. It is complete hot air, and it fails for a number of reasons. The Democrats are not an arena.
So voting for the Democrats, the Democratic Socialists of America and the communists and the socialists believe that, listen, we tried voting for the Democrats. We tried over and over again. We gave the Democrats chance after chance, and they fucked it up every single time. Every time we have voted for the Democrats, it has failed because the Democrats are full of hot air for reasons X, Y, B, and Z. Listen to him say it again.
Time for the other speakers in discussion. Is realignment. It presents itself as this serious strategic strategy. It's 33rd dimensional chess, when really it amounts to voting harder for the Democrats. There is nothing there. It is complete hot air, and it fails for a number of reasons. The Democrats are not an arena of struggle for socialists or communists. They are a bourgeois imperialist party controlled lock, stock, and barrel by the class enemies of the working class. Furthermore, liberals are not allies of socialists and communists. They are enemies.
Oh, yeah?
And you will never get socialism or communism by working through the Democratic Party. You will train activists to act as foot soldiers for their enemies to enact their agenda. And my short, very quick summation here would be that realignment...
I'm sorry, do we need to listen to that again? Because he literally just said everything that I told you guys he was going to say earlier. I didn't listen to this presentation. I've never even heard of this guy. The Democrats will always fail because the Democrats are a bourgeois party that are only interested in addressing the needs of the capitalist. And yeah, let's listen again. Yeah, with enemies like this, who needs friends? Exactly. This is how they feel about the Democrats.
This serious strategic strategy. It's 33rd dimensional chess, when really it amounts to voting harder for the Democrats. There is nothing there. It is complete hot air, And it fails for a number of reasons. The Democrats are not an arena of struggle for socialists or communists. They are a bourgeois imperialist party controlled lock, stock, and barrel by the class enemies of the working class. Furthermore, liberals are not allies of socialists and communists. They are enemies. And you will never get socialism or communism by working through the Democratic Party. You will train activists to act as foot soldiers for their enemies to enact their agenda. And my short, very quick summation here would be that realignment and any effort to work inside the Democratic Party means sacrificing political independence of the working class. That should be completely, that is something that we must utterly reject, and that we should build our own organizations of struggle, and that we should recognize this state cannot be reformed, and that the Democratic Party are our enemies, and that the only result of this will be to continue a legacy of failure and to foreclose the possibilities for socialism in the United States. Thank you.
Not only are the Democratic Party their enemies explicitly, if they continue to try to work within the Democratic Party or try to get the Democratic Party to implement their policies, then socialism will never happen in the United States. This is how the real socialists and communists feel. They are explicit about it. Is anyone confused about whether or not the Democrats are socialists and the socialists are Democrats? Because this is one of the biggest challenges I have, is getting people to acknowledge that no, the Democrats and the socialists don't work together. They don't like each other. They are two different groups. They have two different goals. The socialists literally hate the Democrats. They consider the Democrats to be their enemies. They consider AOC and Bernie Sanders to be traitors to the cause. They consider them all to be the capitalist parties. They don't like them. They don't vote for them. They don't mess around with them. They don't want anything to do with them. Does everyone understand, or is anyone still confused? Okay. Let's keep going.
Okay, Atlee will be next.
Thank you. Thanks to everyone who put this conference together. I know how much work it has been.
Mondani is a Democrat. He's a member of the Democratic Socialists of America. The Democratic Socialists of America are running the Mondani campaign. So do they consider Mondani to be a socialist a traitor for getting the nomination within the Democratic Party? No. It's what they organized for. It's what they worked for. It's what they wanted. Again, the Democratic Socialists of America are reformers. They believe in working within the system. They don't believe in trying to reform the Democrat Party, but they're not trying to reform the Democrat Party by getting Mondani the nomination. They're trying to take something away from the Democrats and make it theirs. So no, Mondani is not a traitor. He's doing exactly what they plan to do. No, they are not trying to take over the Democratic Party. Don't be confused. Just because they took one mayor's nomination does not mean they are trying to take over the Democratic Party. They're flat out telling you they are not trying to do that. They are being very clear in this presentation. They think it's a giant waste of time. Getting one mayor nomination in one blue city is not the same thing as taking over the entire Democratic Party. It's taking a piece of low-hanging fruit that they had access to because the Democratic Socialists in New York City are highly, highly, highly organized. So they're taking what they can, but they're not trying to take over the Democratic Party. That's ridiculous and stupid. The DSA wants a post-capitalist society. The Democrats do not want a post-capitalist society. It doesn't fucking matter if these are some of the stupidest conservative talking points. Excuse me, did you know the Democratic Socialists had rich parents and therefore he cannot really be a socialist because he had rich parents? Do you think anyone buys that except your Fox News watching friends? Do you think anyone cares? No one cares where AOC grew up. No one cares who Mondami's parents were. No one cares, by the way, that he lied on his college application. Literally no one cares. The only people who care about this stuff watch Fox News. That's it. I'm just calling him a hypocrite because I don't understand that when the left says capitalism, they're allowed to use capitalism to abolish it, because I don't know anything about the left, and therefore I think that dunking on the libs is going to beat them because they are hypocrites, because I say so, because I don't actually understand what they believe. I can mock you all day, bro. Either you're here to learn or you can go back to Fox News. If you think dunking on the libs is gonna change anything, you are out of your mind. Let me see. Anything else in the chat? Yes, you can be a poor capitalist. If you believe in private property ownership, if you have a nuclear family, if you are in a monogamous marriage, you can be a poor capitalist. Yeah, it's logically impossible to be a socialist and rich. Yeah, okay. Oh no, someone got his feelings hurt. Oh no, the poor conservative got his feelings hurt, and now he's gonna get permanently banned from the chat because he broke the rules. Go back to Fox News, you little bitch. Don't be crude, okay? Don't be crude. All right, let's keep going.
I hope everybody who put the most effort into it gets a nice little break after this, because you all deserve it. And also thank you for the last panel and whoever is DJing, because I really enjoy starting with Dead Prez and going into low key. So thank you. So just to give a brief introduction, since I know no one here knows who I am, just one thing to understand for me, right? I was raised on.
Hang on. These are not champagne socialists. These people actually believe what they say they believe. Just because someone comes from a wealthy family doesn't mean they don't actually believe what they believe.
On my grandmother's stories of growing up in Hitler's Germany. And so
of
my
course, Jewish
orientation to politics is very much still centered around the German experience and the failures of the German left against the Nazis.
Uh-huh.
I would be rather centric in that regards to a fault, and I'll just start with that so you know my biases going into things. And that's really how I came to Michael Harrington in the first place. I want to give a little continuity from where what you're talking about, Doug, is how Michael Harrington did or did not understand his own politics in relation to the social democracy that failed against the Nazis in Germany. And it's really interesting. I'll talk about two, but three instances as well. So back in 1968, and I don't.
Okay, guys, I'm seeing the term champagne socialist show up in the chat now. Let's be very clear. That term is irrelevant to what we're doing because it doesn't apply to the people we're looking at. This is another one of those instances where you guys hear things on YouTube by people who are pretending to be socialists or communists, or you hear things by people who are commentating on the YouTubers who pretend to be socialists and communists. It's not relevant. The YouTube world has nothing to do with the far left radical revolutionary socialist activists. Has nothing to do with it at all. So these are not champagne socialists. These people believe that is a fucking cope. When you use the term champagne socialist, it's basically a cope to say these people don't really believe what they say they believe because they're rich. Okay. Yeah, okay. Are we ready to listen now? Have I made myself clear, or do I need to keep explaining this over and over and over again? Is everyone listening? Does everyone understand what? Okay, no, we're not fucking doing this. No, you're in a timeout. All right.
I don't know much about Harrington's background. I really didn't know much about him or the DSA in general before I started reading about him, even though I became a member of the DSA and still am technically. So in 1968, right, there's really no evidence that he is familiar with the German social democracy against the Nazis, right? But the entirety of his belief in the democratic left, or toward a democratic left, or whatever he called it in the book that year, was of course the idea that a unified revolutionary working class was impossible, And this cross-class alliance that you're talking about, Doug, right? Harrington explicitly referred to it as a new middle class. And there's really no evidence that he understood that in this kind of realignment around the new middle class, he was actually reframing or rebranding a more conservative version of the social democratic politics in Germany at that time, right? And what is most interesting about this is by the time we get to 1976 in his book, The Twilight of Capitalism, he advances actually a pretty staunch criticism of the electoral path to socialism, at least as it was articulated by those like Karl Kautsky, Rudolf Hilferding, and Edward Bernstein of the German Social Democratic Party, or the SPD, right? It was really strange to me because at this point, he's already criticizing the electoral path to socialism to such an extent, and to me, I've laughed out loud. The literal title of his chapter in 1976, where he advanced the criticism, he called it bourgeois socialism. So to me, and this is the thing that I still can't figure out, Doug, maybe you can, it's how you can have somebody, at least at a theoretical level, who's already coming to criticisms of these things, but at the same time, there is no connection, an entire disconnect between what he was advancing at the theoretical level, at least in this one instance, looking at Germany and then building a politic that's actually the same in so many ways, if not obviously more conservative. And by 1989, Socialism Past and Future which is his last book, he reiterated his criticisms of Kautsky and Hilferding and the electoral path to socialism of the SPD. And unfortunately, he then ended his last book looking to SPD leader Edward Bernstein on the new middle class again, which, you know, and I get the only way that I can understand it, trying to reconcile theoretically in my head this fundamental disconnect that existed throughout Michael Harrington, is ultimately like a left form of American exceptionalism, which I definitely think exists throughout liberal, progressive, and the democratic socialist left today. And so to bring a little background to this in terms of German social democracy, to sort of relate it back to the United States more broadly, right? Centered to the idea of people like Karl Kautsky and Rudolf Hilferding and Edward Bernstein, was the idea that, in this case, the Weimar Republic, the state in general, through the electoral path to socialism was through a regulation of capitalism or a management of capitalism in this era of post-capitalist crisis, right? This was their belief that the state could be relied on for the path to socialism as a way of lifting up the working class into what was then a new middle class to them as well, right? It was sort of a project to universalize.
Oh no. Does anyone want to take a guess as to the argument this person is about to make? Does anyone who has been listening instead of talking about things that are completely unrelated in the chat, does anyone who want to take a guess at the argument this person is about to make? Because I think I know the argument they're about to make, and I want to see who's paying attention. I also might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure I know the argument they're about to make. Does anyone want to take a guess? It starts in Germany in the 1930s. Nope, it doesn't. Nope, not listening. You're not listening to what's being said. I don't care what your friend references. I don't know who your friend is. I don't know if your friend's relevant on the left. Well, this is getting close. Is he about to suggest the Nazis are capitalists because of reliance on the state? Close. I think that's going in the direction of what I think he's going to say. I think what he's about to say is, listen, the leftists in Germany, they tried to use the electoral process to bring about the world that they wanted in the Weimar Republic. They tried. The leftists, the communists in Germany, they tried using the electoral process. And do you know what happened when the communists in Germany tried to use the electoral process? Literally Hitler. The electoral process literally created Hitler, literally created the Nazis. The electoral process is therefore literally fascism. I bet you that's some derivation of the argument that he's about to make. They really tried to use the electoral process, but it just didn't work out so well because it ended in Nazism. When it comes to the phrase American exceptionalism, does it get its meaning from meritocracy? Yup. If so, is meritocracy a capitalist idea? Yes. You cannot have individualism without meritocracy. You cannot have capitalism without individualism. Capitalism, individualism, and meritocracy are two of the pillars that uphold the capitalist state. So if you take away individualism and meritocracy, you take away capitalism, essentially. All right, let's listen. Anyone who mentions the term champagne socialist from here on forward is going to get put in a timeout. We're paying attention to what's going on now. We are not talking about Vosh. Vosh is not relevant at all to what we are doing.
In terms of German social democracy, to sort of relate it back to the United States more broadly, right, centered to the idea of people like Karl Kautsky and Rudolf Hilferding and Edward Bernstein, was the idea that, in this case, the Weimar Republic, the state in general, through the electoral path, socialism was through a regulation of capitalism or a management of capitalism in this era of post-capitalist crisis, right? This was their belief that the state could be relied on for the path to socialism as a way of lifting up the working class into what was then a new middle class to them as well, right? It was sort of a project to universalize.
Hey, bro, I'm about to be very clear. Unless you are willing to tell us your boy's wife's name right now, and then go find videos of your boy's wife talking about what they're doing in the Chicago Teachers Union, then I don't give a flying fuck what your friend's wife says. Put her name in the chat, provide videos of her speaking. If she's part of the Chicago Teachers Union, you should be doing that anyway, because she is not our fucking friend. So I don't want to hear any more opinions about what your friend's wife thinks until you put her name in the fucking chat and expose her and do what's required.
This notion of a new middle class. And to me, what's most interesting about that, not only is the relationship to how Michael Harrington saw it as well, but also this was the dominant form of the SPD's anti-fascist politics as well, because the entire idea was centered on universalizing this new middle class through the power of the government and the electoral, the electoral inexorable march from capitalism to socialism was going to be the means of keeping the Nazis at bay, to stop them from rising in their influence throughout the country.
See, the move from capitalism to socialism was supposed to keep the Nazis at bay, but it was the electoral process that failed us to keep the Nazis at bay. Again, I want to listen. I really want to make sure people are listening to this.
This notion of a new middle class. And to me, what's most interesting about that, not only is the relationship to how Michael Harrington saw it as well, but also this was the dominant form of the SPD's anti-fascist politics as well, because the entire idea was centered on universalizing this new middle class through the power of the government and the electoral, the electoral inexorable march from capitalism to socialism was going to be the means of keeping the Nazis at bay, to stop them from rising in their influence throughout the country. Sorry, noting the chat. And so what you have, what was paradoxical for the German SPD at the time, was the fact that this very idea, this very new middle class that they looked to, that they put their hope in universalizing as this pseudo anti-fascist politics, was that ultimately the middle class in Germany then had, at least in large part, been the product of German settler colonial expansion into the end of the
What group are you with? What group are you with? I know there's a delay, but I want you to answer. What group are you with? You can be here and you can talk in my chat. You're obviously a socialist or communist. You can be here, but I want to know what group you're with. We're waiting. Oh, you're with the DSA? Okay. Well, okay, so it'll be interesting to get your opinions on this then, because these people hate you. I hope you understand that.
the 19th century and into the 20th century. However, right, and so for people like Rudolf Hilferding and Karl Kautsky, they actually believe that colonialism was a natural extension or an inevitable extension of capitalism itself. So the idea for them was that in a sense, or in essence, to the colonized people in Africa, you are now being part, you have the privilege of being part of this process where you go from colonized person to work.
Bro, are you fucking retarded? See, I knew this was going to happen. I knew there was going to be at least one conservative in the chat who refused to listen to the entire first part of this presentation and was going to be coping in my chat going, no, you don't understand. It doesn't matter what the socialists say. It doesn't matter. They're using the Democrats. The Democrats are the useful idiots of the socialists, because that's what I keep hearing on Fox News, and Donald Trump keeps saying it on True Social, and it can't be true. Trump can't be lying to me. Fox News can't be lying to me. The Daily Wire and Steven Crowder, they can't be lying to me. All of my favorite conservative influencers, they can't be lying to me. The Democrats must be useful idiots of the communists. I knew there was going to be at least one person. Seriously, bro? Seriously. Rewind the presentation and start again.
In class on the path of potential socialism, presumably through your control over the settler colonial state in Africa, right? This was not a side aspect of their politics. It was part of the essence of their politics. And the Weimar Republic was the means by which this process was going to happen. But unfortunately, right, what do we know about after the end of World War I? As a result of Germany losing the war, they also lost control of their settler colonies. So the expropriation of surplus value into Germany from the settler colonies, right, part of the condition for the rise.
I promise you, the DSA absolutely understands that the revolutionary socialists don't like them. Do you know who doesn't understand this? Conservatives. Hey, Reworked, can you confirm that you guys in the DSA absolutely know that the revolutionary socialists don't like you and don't agree with you? If you'd like the narrative going around the DSA, it's the opposite of what you think. A lot of our committees have positioned themselves back into... Well, no, bro. Okay, I don't think you're listening. My argument this entire stream is the DSA are the reformers within the electoral process. The revolutionaries, which is who we're watching right now, these are the revolutionaries, do not agree with electoral reformism. So you need to go back and start again, because I have not made the argument that the DSA is not doing electoral reformism. I have explicitly said on multiple occasions the DSA is doing electoral reformism. So thank you for confirming I was right. And now can you confirm that you guys know that the revolutionaries don't like you?
As the new middle class in general had evaporated. And so over the course of the Weimar years, from the end of 1918 to, late 1932 and the first quarter of 1933, what you saw is a fundamental disconnect between German social democratic politics and what they hoped to achieve their successes and the actual conditions of Germany in general. Because far from being capable of giving rise to this universal new middle class, situations of crisis, both capitalist crisis and their losing the benefit of the settler colonies, had created a crisis of worsening the middle class that the SPD was supposed to be universalizing. And so this brings us back to the United States today, right? It is, to me, it is no coincidence that Bernie Sanders, for example, that this is not a personal attack, right? This is just reality, right? That he and his wife became millionaires for the first time after his book comes out, advancing the centering progressive.
Okay, so I want everyone to pay attention. The DSA member in the chat is saying, yes, we understand that the revolutionaries don't like us, but they are saying, the DSA are saying, we'll work with the revolutionaries because, again, the DSA believes working within the system to try to overthrow the system, whereas the revolutionaries don't believe in doing that. Thank you for confirming.
Progressive politics and his democratic socialist politics.
Also,
on reversing this.
You're now hearing the revolutionaries shit talk Bernie Sanders. They may also shit talk AOC because they don't like her either.
This is not a personal attack, right? This is just reality, right? That he and his wife became millionaires for the first time after his book comes out, advancing the centering progressive politics and his democratic socialist politics on reversing this decline of the middle class, right? It is the same sort of project, except it's modified because the United States is not Weimar Germany, right?
Just to be really clear, we don't hate you any more than we hate Jews or other, minority groups or anything like that. We don't hate you. We think your ideas are monumentally misguided. We think your ideas will only result in starvation and death. But we don't hate you as human beings. There are socialists and communists are welcome to come on this channel. If you guys want to talk to us about what you think, I have a disposition to actually do this accurately and to accurately describe what you guys believe, but we do not hate you any more than we hate the Jews. I'm just saying.
The United States doesn't exist as a settler colonial power in the exact same way that Germany does. It has its own history, its own settler colonial nature that is different yet very much related to Germany at the same time. Similarly, the problem for contemporary social democracy in the United States today, trying to universalize this notion of the middle class, is it is similarly based on an impossible fiction. And this is really important to me because you can even go to Yale historian Timothy Snyder, who, amongst others like Isabel Wilkerson, have explained the interrelationship between Nazi fascism and the US as a settler colonial project, right? Because Hitler was explicit about it. It was his settler colonial expansion was a war for Lebensraum or living space, and he looked exactly to the United States as the project he wanted to emulate, right? But to understand that the core of this project was this fiction of a universal middle class, right? It was a fiction grounded in this idea of an Aryan race centered on nuclear middle class families and a Nazi version of the American dream. Again, that's not me, that's Yale historian Timothy Snyder. But then if we look at the United States and the reformist left today, certainly Bernie Sanders, calling to the same universal sort of middle class, it is entirely predicated on the perpetuation of settler colonial expansion because it is centered on the very same center of both Nazi fascism, German social democracy, and the settler project of America, which is this notion of nuclear middle class families all marching to the same American dream. And the center of these sort of liberal, progressive, democratic, socialist politics is no. There's living space for everyone.
Listen again. Listen to this.
Look at the United States and the reformist left today, certainly Bernie Sanders, calling to the same universal sort of middle class, it is entirely predicated on the perpetuation of settler colonial expansion because it is
settler colonial expansion means capitalist because they believe the United States are the settler colonists who stole the indigenous land from the Native Americans and then privatized it under the oppressive force of capitalism. So when they're saying the settler colonial expansion, that means the capitalist expansion.
Is centered on the very same center of both Nazi fascism, German social democracy, and the settler project of America, which is this notion of nuclear middle-class families.
Nuclear middle-class families are the center of the settler colonial capitalist experiment in the United States.
All marching to the same American dream, and the center of these sort of liberal,
The American dream means capitalism.
progressive, democratic, socialist politics is no. There's living space for everyone. Everyone can benefit from the settler colony and the settler state, right? That is what they're saying. However, right, we just got done with the internationalism panel. We know that—
Hang on. There's a question over on Kick, and you're being facetious, but I'm going to answer your question anyway. How can the land be stolen is what you're asking. How could the United States settler colonists steal the land if no one owns the land? So here's what they believe. The left believes that when the land is under the caretakership of the indigenous people, it is not owned by anyone. It is owned by the collective. It becomes privatized land that's been stolen when the settler colonists, the bourgeois, come in and steal the land from the indigenous people and take it away and then make it exclusive, which is to put borders around it and to say who can and cannot come on that land. So under the indigenous people, no one owned the land. It was under the caretakership of the collective. Under the bourgeois settler colonists, it is privatized and exclusive, and therefore is wrong and bad.
the fundamental global conditions that gave rise to the US middle class in the first place, namely its privileged position at the end of World War II and what it's been able to usher in through this American century, right? Benefits that are fundamentally eroding around us, an acceleration to a multipolar world that we see accelerating around us right now, the benefits in the effect or the benefits of neoliberalism as it is continuing to—
See, it's pathetic, isn't it? It's pathetic. Even the DSA knows that my biggest challenge is actually the bullshit conservative MAGA Fox News watching right. Even the fucking DSA knows this. The Israel-owned, AIPAC-owned, Fox News watching, Zionist, fucking pro-war with Iran right is the biggest challenge we have. It's not actually the left, it's the right.
Accrue to the United States. All of these conditions are fundamentally changing, yet contemporary democratic socialist reformist politics, right? At least for the German Social Democratic Party, they had the largest political party against the Nazis. For us, we got Bernie Sanders, AOC, and the Squad to do what the SPD could not. And I think it speaks to, right, what Walter Benjamin referred to as a fundamental delusion that has been part and parcel to social democracy for the beginning, because its leadership can rise to positions of power by parroting the same universal middle class talking points, and who ultimately reinforce this tendency towards social democracy, because it's what allows them to suck up all the oxygen in the room, the one to always be with books and speakers and all of these things having this institutional backing, always based on a perpetuation or the subsumption of revolutionary politics into something more palatable for themselves, namely social democracy. And I think what exists part and parcel to this is the elimination or the burying of the actual politics that existed in the German left against the Nazis in a sort of black hole, if you will, because as soon as you start exposing the politics that existed in the left in Germany against the Nazis, you expose not only the theoretical failures of the reformist left today, but you start to piece together this intergenerational history of how it was the case, or how it has been the case, that the lies and distortions that are told about this history become reproduced, right? So there's no better case of this than Noam Chomsky today, right? Repeatedly in interviews, he has blamed the German Communist Party for what led to Hitler's rise to power. right? It was the fact that by the July 1932 elections, after the German Communist Party started at the end of 1918, by the July 1932 elections, the SPD had become such a complete failure. It was by this time, all those years later, that the Communist Party first won more votes than the SPD, right? This is what Chomsky blames as the, what'd you say?
Got to start to wrap up. You're at 13.
This was the very the reason that Noam Chomsky blamed, whereas the entire reality, and you can go to leaders of the SPD like Franz Neumann, who blamed the SPD for not joining with the Communist Party in a united front for revolution, rather than what he referred to as the SPD's politics of lesser evilism, which inevitably, in his words, lead to semi-dictatorships on the path to fascism. Yeah, and I'll stop there. Thanks, everyone.
Okay.
So he just said, by the
Great,
way,
thanks.
he just said that lesser evilism basically leads to fascism. Lesser evilism means voting for the Democrats.
Exactly. Sorry, I'm just trying to keep everyone to time so that we have plenty of time for discussion. So, Coco?
Hey, I'm Coco. You see him pronouns. And
Coco.
I was introduced previously, so I'll just
All right.
get things started.
Hey, thanks, average person.
So my presentation is
Appreciate it.
going to be focusing on the, basically the kind of conditions that we face in the United States today, the historical causes for them, and why revolutionary politics and the strategy of revolution is, vital to the advance of the socialist movement, and why reformism can't actually give us, give us a path to socialism, particularly in relation to the history of the United States. So first, I'll start with a very broad overview of the development of the socialist movement. So in the mid to late 19th century was when socialism started to take root in the United States, and there were a variety.
No, I mean the Republicans are absolutely going to get the Republicans are going to get slaughtered in the midterms. They're going to get slaughtered. I don't know if the base will show out for the Democrats. I think the base is mostly being radicalized to the left right now. But the fact of the matter is that the whole Epstein bullshit combined with the Iran bullshit, the base ain't showing out for Trump and the Republicans either, because they're pissed off at all of them. So I don't know, man. I think we're going to see a massive Democrat victory in the midterms, but I don't think it's because of anything the Democrats have done. I think it's just because the Republicans and the right are not going to turn out because they're really pissed off. But I could be wrong. We'll see.
Of trends like a strong sort of utopian socialist bent of forming communes and escaping capitalist society, and basically trying to build a utopia on stolen indigenous land through collaborating with the kind of U.S. settler government. But there were also more militant, more revolutionary kinds of socialism that had already started to develop by that time. A more working class oriented socialism and Marxist socialism really took root after the outflux of German immigrants after the 1848 revolution was crushed in Germany. And many of these German immigrants soon brought Marxism to the working class of the United States. And quickly, by the end of the 19th century, there was a massive growth of a union movement, a labor movement, and socialists played a strong part in building that labor movement from the very first days of that struggle.
Wow.
And in the early 20th century,
you mean the unions are socialists?
Beginning of the Socialist Party, which ended up being numerically one of the largest organizations in U.S. left history, and had a primary focus.
All right, we obviously have a new person, and the new person is coming in, he thinks he's going to own the libs. And that conservative, you probably watched a lot of Fox News, bro. You maybe even read one or two of Glenn Beck's books or Mark Levin's books, and you think you know everything about communism. Maybe you even read Jesse Kelly's bullshit book about being an anti-communist when Jesse Kelly doesn't even know what communists believe. So I don't know why he's writing a book about being an anti-communist. Doesn't even know what people believe in the first place. Maybe you watched some Tim Pool, and so you think you understand the left. What's stopping these delusionalists from pooling their money and starting their own commune? Well, Socialists do not believe in private property. So socialists are not going to be no, asshole. No. Actually, can everyone actually I'm not even going to answer this asshole's question. I'm going to shame him in the chat. Get ready to be fucking hazed, Jonathan. You're not going to get the answer from me. You're about to get the answer from the chat. Guys, can you all answer Jonathan's question? Because Jonathan doesn't know the answer to this. What is stopping socialists from buying their own land and forming a commune in a capitalist country? Can you all shame him by saying the right answer so that I don't have to? And that way, perhaps Jonathan can understand. Oh, no. Jonathan, we're now putting you in a timeout. So you're listening. Jonathan is no longer talking in the chat. Jonathan can now listen. Yep, you're being a dumb retard, Jonathan. What is the answer to the question? Socialists don't believe in private property. Exactly. They wouldn't want that because that would be engaging in capitalism instead of overthrowing the government, which is the capitalist U.S. government. They're not buying private property. They don't believe in private property ownership. They don't believe in private land ownership. The answer is not money. Nope. Only retards think the answer is money. The answer is they don't believe in private property ownership. They are after revolution in the United States of America. They think if they get a socialist revolution here, there will be a domino effect throughout the world. That's exactly right. It's not even that socialists do not believe in private property ownership and are therefore never going to pool their money to buy a plot of land. That is a retarded conservative bullshit idea, probably someone that spends a lot of time watching Fox News. In addition to that, though, they don't want a commune within the United States. They want to overthrow the United States government. They don't believe that a commune within a capitalist society can survive because it's a little bastion of communism surrounded by a sea of capitalism. They don't believe that can survive. It also doesn't meet their goal of getting global socialism, which is what they ultimately think they need. Look how much smarter my chat is than the Fox News retards who come in. Look at how much smarter my chat is. Tons of right answers in the chat. Hopefully Jonathan listened instead of crying into a corner.
On electoralism, independent electoralism. So getting socialists elected, particularly to local office, but also with the runs of people like Eugene Debs for president. And these made significant inroads for socialist ideology, but were plagued by, the contradictions of a merger between revolutionary and reformist politics within the Socialist Party's organization. And this ultimately led to, after the Bolshevik Revolution in 1917, the split between the Communist Party and the Socialist Party, which kind of put down on paper the distinction between reform and revolution in the United States, for the time since then. But the real thing I want to focus on is not giving a complete outline of the history of the left, but to point out that, the left has gone up and down in waves based on the actions of the U.S. government and the actions of participants of the left, their ideology, their strategy, etc. And throughout U.S. history, we've seen this mix of repression and co-optation to deal with the rise of left-wing militancy. Most notably, in the 1920s, there was the first Red Scare where hundreds of communist and socialist activists.
Hang on. You're confused. You think we're talking about your definitions of something. I don't care about your definitions of something. Your definitions of what it is are irrelevant. I'm not having a libertarian argument right now about private property ownership and whether or not you really own the property, because really you own the debt on the property. That is not what we're fucking talking about. We are talking about how the left defines capitalism, which is private property ownership. And guess what, bro? If they win and we lose, you're going to live in a world where you don't have any opportunity to own any land at all. We're going to live in a world in which you will be assigned a home. You will be assigned a job. You will not have parental rights over your kids. So can you please rein in your feelings? It is not about your definition. It is about their definition. That is the only definition that matters.
Deported or imprisoned, and this really helped to break up a lot of momentum of the left at that time. McCarthyism is obviously the most well-known example, with the blacklists and complete hounding out of revolutionaries from political life in the 1950s. And in the 1960s and 70s, the COINTELPRO.
How do socialists spread their literature while not engaging in capitalism? I never said socialists didn't engage in capitalism. Socialists are allowed to engage in capitalism. It says they're allowed to engage in capitalism in the Communist Manifesto. Socialists are allowed to engage in capitalism as long as they're trying to overthrow the system. So there's no one who has said, and you've been on my channel long enough to know this now, I have literally never said that they're not allowed to engage in capitalism. That's something you made up. Please stop doing that. We don't do that here. How do socialists spread their literature? They write it and they print it out and they hand it out. They make zines, they make pamphlets, they have anarchist websites all over the place where they distribute this stuff. They distribute it in person. It's really not hard. Socialists have computers, guys. Socialists know how to create a Word document, or they use Canva if they're being really fancy about it. Or sometimes they use AI too if they're being really fancy about it. Socialists know how to create a pamphlet that they can print out on a home printer and hand it out. No, you can't correct me. You can't correct me. And I'm going to be very blunt. I don't actually care about what you have to say, because I know enough to know that there have been enough socialists and communists in my chat over the years that you assholes always try to gaslight us at some point. So no one pay attention to what he has to say unless I'm asking him a direct question, because you guys do this all the time where you come into the chat and you say, excuse me, that's not really what we believe. Except every single thing I'm saying, I have you guys on video saying. Every single thing that I advance in this stream, I literally have videos of you guys saying it. So no, we're not interested in your gaslighting. Thank you.
Was used to spy on and repress and even assassinate and imprison many of the most important revolutionary leaders of that time. So that's one aspect of it, is there's been a long chain of repression that's basically broken off some of the most militant leaders of the movement, whether it be from assassination, imprisonment, or through kicking them out of the workplace and kicking them out of the places where they could engage with the working class. And then on the other hand, you see this tendency, particularly of the Democratic Party historically, to co-opt and to take under their wing elements of the left in order to accommodate it and take away kind of the
See, now the conservative in the chat, the conservative who didn't know shit about shit, is getting his feelings hurt. He's puffing out his chest like a big man. He's saying all the conservative gun owners are never gonna let the communists have their revolution. Bro, you guys won't even leave your house wearing a MAGA hat. Sit down, shut the fuck up. You're in another timeout. Your job is to listen.
radical edge of his doctrine. And today we see that method of accommodation playing a primary role. Okay. In 2008, the financial crash really has produced the kind of conditions that we've seen in the United States since then. That's led to the rising of a number of mass movements, such as Occupy Wall Street, the Black Lives Matter movement, Me Too, Standing Rock, and some labor activities, especially around Fight for 15 and organization of new unions. So these are the kind of conditions by 2016 that kind of gave a spark to the Bernie Sanders campaign. But I think the hard truth that we have to recognize is that most of the left fell right behind the Bernie Sanders campaign and its hopes of kind of reforming the Democratic Party or creating some sort of broader socialist movement. And now, after 6 years since that original campaign, I think we've seen a much more complicated phenomenon. We saw the rise of the Democratic Socialists of America, which is primarily a reformist organization and primarily has an emphasis on elections and running and supporting people within the Democratic Party. And I think this has been, a huge problem for the entire left.
He did what now? When did he tell you that?
Since the massive growth of the DSA and the overall stagnation or disorganization of the revolutionary left, socialism has been defined by these reformist elements, which don't have a clear strategic vision, to actually bring about socialism. But moreover, when they do have a clear strategic vision, it's a vision that, by definition, will never lead to socialism. I think this speaks to the overall weakness of the US socialist movement, that we continually get roped into these bourgeois campaigns and completely fall for the kind of liberal social democratic nexus which the Democratic Party uses to co-opt and disorganize those who are starting to question the legitimacy of the system. So I think the alternative that we can have today is a type of revolutionary politics. And, I think this is a very important distinction to make between reform and revolution. It's not solely about, revolutionaries are for overthrowing the system and reformists are for, changing the system. And we're both fighting for, the same goal, that is workers' control and socialism.
Wait,
in reality, the reformist method and the revolutionary method are worlds apart, even in the tactics and strategies that we pursue.
Wow, he's actually saying it's not actually. So he's saying, listen, the reformists and the revolutionaries, it's not just that one of us wants to work within the electoral system and one of us doesn't. We're actually extremely different. This is interesting.
Social democratic nexus, which the Democratic Party uses to co-opt and disorganize those who are starting to question the legitimacy of the system. So I think the alternative that we can have today is a type of revolutionary politics. And, I think this is a very important distinction to make between reform and revolution. It's not solely about, revolutionaries are for overthrowing the system.
Hang on. Yes, they're both working towards a post-capitalist society. Both of them want to overthrow capitalism. They have different ideas about how to overthrow it. Listen.
Revolution. It's not solely about, revolutionaries are for overthrowing the system and reformists are for, changing the system. And we're both fighting for, the same goal, that is workers' control and socialism. In reality, the reformist method and the revolutionary method are worlds apart, even in the tactics and strategies that we pursue. So I think an important work to read is Lukasz's Lenin, a study of the units of his thought, which gives a very clear explanation of what a revolutionary politics can look like in contrast to reformism. And he has this idea of the actuality of revolution. He makes this point that the thing that distinguished Lenin and the Bolsheviks at that time was they actually, created a sort of nexus between, the revolutionary outlook and the day-to-day work that they were involved in, which was not common in the socialist movement at that time. Like the German Social Democratic Party, the German Social Democratic Party really created this distinction between, like, we're organizing for reforms today. The movement is everything and the end is nothing. Socialism is nothing, the movement is everything, that kind of thing. And ultimately, they would have at their private meetings talk about, like how great socialism will be. But in reality, their day-to-day work had nothing to do with the vision of bringing about a revolution or bringing about.
All right,
socialism.
Jonathan. I'm very sorry, Jonathan. I'm very sorry. I just don't think you meet the IQ requirement to be here. You do need to have at least a minimum of a 100 IQ to be in my audience, because I can't take this low IQ retard shit that you're doing. So I'm very sorry, but you are hereby permanently banned from the channel. Go back to Fox News. I don't want to see you here again.
Huge disjuncture between, the goal and how we're actually fighting for it. So to get very concrete about this, I think we need to recognize the particular situation we're in the United States today, that, the working class, the unions, and the organizations of the left have been disorganized for 40 years since, the 1960s and 1970s movements. And that's created a situation where the socialist movement doesn't have much of a place to take root on a mass level. You know, the precondition for a mass socialist movement that can actually, fight for the kind of things that we want to fight for, not just a reform of the Democratic Party or a certain, set of watered down demands. The precondition of that is mass organizations of the working class, like unions, like community organizations, and other
Unions.
things that can bring the working class into political life. The reason the German Social Democratic Party, the Bolsheviks, all of these organizations of the past, the Chinese Communist Party, etc., could actually reach a mass audience is because the working class was already organized on this basic level. So revolutionaries need to integrate themselves into these things. So if we recognize the overall weakness of this particular moment, I think that informs the kind of tasks that we need to pursue. I think the kind of insight that revolutionary politics and this idea of the actuality of the revolution can give us is that, we need to change that situation of the disorganization of the working class. So I think we need to proceed on, what was that?
You're at 10 minutes?
Okay, yeah, we need to proceed along two lines. And the first line is part of what we're doing with this conference, which is to reorganize the scattered layers of revolutionaries across the country into a principled organization that can act together, can act at local and national levels to, put forward and develop revolutionary politics and bring people into, the Marxist movement in general. But on another level, I think we need to be very concerned with how we help to organize the organic energy of the working class in the United States. With the George Floyd rebellions in 2020, I think it showed how much militancy and how much, desire for revolutionary and sweeping changes there is among the US working class. But that movement was never, guided into any types of organizations. Organizations were in fact very hard to find in these movements. And because of that, the sentiments of the masses were able to be redirected or completely, erased in that. So, the liberals co-opted and repressed that movement at that time, and it never led to a concretization of any mass organizations to work with. So
I need you to stop talking and I need you to start listening. You are asking questions that are completely irrelevant to what we're doing here. What we're doing here is not trying to convince anyone to be socialist. What we're doing here is not trying to help you work out your feelings about socialism. What we are doing here is trying to learn what the radical revolutionary far left believes. If you don't want to know what the far left believes, this is not the stream for you. But the problem is you keep spamming my chat asking really irrelevant questions, and then other people in the chat get distracted by those questions, and then they try to answer them even though they don't know what they're talking about either. And so they're giving you answers that don't match up to anything. And this is starting to become distracting for me, and it's starting to become distracting for everyone. The purpose of what we are doing is to listen to the left, to learn what they believe. If that is not what you're here for, go somewhere else.
So, I think we need to proceed along those two lines, which is to help reorganize the working class, whether that be in unions or community organizations on that basic level, while also organizing an organization of revolutionaries that can act within that. And I think there's good evidence in the past, including in the United States context, that the concerted organization of revolutionaries can help rebuild or build for the first time these kind of organizations that can act as the basic line of defense for the working class. The final thing I'll say, I'd love to get to more, is that, I think electoralism is a huge problem for the US left, and particularly this Democratic Party electoralism, which actively leads to the co-optation of our movement. I think we need to severely criticize all of the politicians that, run under the socialist banner today, while they do things like support US military funding, while they, oppose the liberation of Palestine, while they completely give up their fight for even the most basic reforms they advocate. Instead, I think we need to primarily be focused on the organization of, this radical energy that has no place to go in the United States. The Democratic Party is the enemy of that mass sentiment. So we need to help build that kind of alternative. And the vast majority of the activity will be outside of elections. I think there are some role for elections, but it has to be under very strict, very strict sorts of controls and for a very strict purpose. We're not going to recompose and rebuild the US working class through just calling for universal health care and running on the Democratic Party ballot line. In fact, that's the best way to never have universal health care happen, let alone a socialist revolution. We need an independent and revolutionary vision, an independent revolutionary organization, and a focus on organizing the masses of the working class in a broad sense. And that's why I think it's so important that, we're here today and we're continuing to try to rebuild the revolutionary left. Without, the kind of activity of every single person on this call and all the people that, have our kind of vision, we can't do anything. We need to get organized together and work towards our common goals. Otherwise, this kind of social democratic trend will fall straight back into liberalism and disenchant the working class for a generation. The stakes are extremely high, particularly today. So it's necessary that we continue to fight, necessary that we continue to organize. And I hope that we can all do that together moving forward. Thank you.
All right. That is the end of the first presentation. So I think that this makes it pretty clear, as clear can be, that revolutionary socialists do not like the Democrats. They don't even really believe what the DSA is going to work. And so they are not working with the Democrats. They're not secret Democrats. They're not voting for the Democrats. They don't believe it's going to work at all. They've said it again for the 8,000th time on video. So I hope everyone has that worked out of their system now that we just spent probably about an hour and a half listening to them talk about it. We are moving on to our next presentation. This presentation is going to be super fun. Unite and Fight the Right, Politics and Methods for Organizing Against Fascism. Let's see. We've got a college professor look at this, guys. A professor of comparative race and ethnic studies at Texas Christian University. Wow, not only does this socialist have a job, but this socialist has a job teaching as a professor at Texas Christian University. I don't know. I've been told reliably by conservatives that socialists don't have jobs and that they don't exist in red states and that they aren't Christian or can't be Christian because they're all atheists. And yet this socialist seems to have a job in a red state at a Christian university. I'm just saying. And then this one is a Black Studies professor at Wayne State University. That's in Michigan. And oh, wow, a founding member of the Denver Communists. We probably know who this is. Okay, so let's see what they had to say. This actually, you know what? Holy shit, Reagan, do you know what this is? Reagan, this is the original Denver Communist Socialism Conference. That's why we've seen this before. This is like the precursor to the Firebrand Collective. Because look at down here. The Seattle Revolutionary Socialists, the Tempest Collective, the Denver Communists, the Boston Revolution. This is the precursor to the Firebrand Collective. That's why we recognize this. I fucking knew it. I fucking knew that trans person was in the Tempest Collective.
Thanks, Bill. First, I'd like to start by thanking the conference organizers for convening this gathering, for us to be able to organize, build camaraderie, and really in this session, learn from our struggles. I'd like to again thank you, Bill, for extending the invitation and even curating this panel, which I think really has a lot of juice, a lot of energy, and hopefully will generate a lot of discussion and sort of entry points for future organizing at the grassroots. I've really been tasked with kicking off our discussion. As Bill mentioned, my name is Janelle Hope. I'm a scholar activist. I grew up in Oakland, California.
Scholar activist.
Organized for some years in Sacramento in response to sort of police violence and in support of Black art and cultural spaces. However, for the past 3 years, I've been in Texas, where I'm a college professor. My research is around Afro-Asian solidarity and the history of Black anti-fascism. Presently, I organize with the Black and Brown Racial Justice Organization in Fort Worth called United Fort Worth. And a lot of the work that I do in community and in concert with UFW, again, is sort of around political education. I'll talk a lot about how we're interweaving.
The only comments I want to see in the chat from here on forward are comments that are directly relevant to the content of the presentation, or you are allowed to ask questions or answer questions to other people. That's it. I don't want to see commentary about the looks of the presenters. I don't want to hear about your opinion about socialism from a book you read in 1983. I don't want to hear about what your best friend had to say about all this. I don't want to hear about what you heard on Fox News that one time. I don't want to hear about what the main issue is on Twitter right now. I don't want to hear about something that you heard Vosh say. I don't want to hear about any of that. This is a class, guys. This stream is a class. This is a class to learn about the radical revolutionary far left in America. If people are going to keep distracting, what I'm going to do from now on is if you are putting stuff in the chat that is not relevant to the presentation, you're getting put in a timeout. If you don't learn and you keep doing it over and over and over again, eventually I'm just going to take away your ability to talk entirely. So please, if you're going to be here, the purpose of this is to learn what these people believe. Anything that is not related to this or a question that is relevant to this is a distraction from what we're trying to do. So please rein it in and be respectful of the rules and what we're trying to accomplish here.
Sort of anti-fascism into our current or our upcoming Freedom School curriculum, which will be rolling out in the next couple of weeks, and also how anti-fascism is woven in sort of our work around mutual aid throughout the city. As we all know, but just to sort of set the tone, as we all know, we are currently witnessing the global rise of fascism as leaders like Brazil's Jair Bolsonaro, the outgoing Philippines President Rodrigo Duterte, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, China's President Xi Jinping,
hey, thanks, average
Britain's
person.
Prime Minister
Appreciate it.
Boris Johnson, as well as a host of others, have all embraced nationalism and authoritarianism, using their country's police and or military to incarcerate and even kill racial and ethnic minorities. But we don't need to look beyond our own colonial borders to see fascism flourishing and decimating communities. It's happening across our own country and has been happening for quite some time.
Bye, socialists.
And while the relentless boot of fascism continues to stamp out any real sense of democracy, freedom, and justice, we must recognize that anti-fascism is the rallying and organizing point of entry as majority of our struggles.
When they say fascism, they don't mean National Socialism, they mean capitalism. So just so we're clear for the dissident right-wingers in the chat, they're not talking about fascist in what you think fascist is, although they wouldn't like that either because they don't like borders, and so they don't like National Socialists because National Socialists like borders. National Socialists also didn't want to privatize everything. Or excuse me, no, strike that. National Socialists wanted to allow private property ownership, so they don't like them for that reason either. So when they're saying fascism, they mean capitalism, essentially. I literally have them on video defining fascism as capitalism, so you can go to my Substack and find that. It's not actually that hard to find.
Whether they be across race, gender, class, sexual orientation, immigration, education, and even thinking about this very horrific epidemic of gun violence that we are living through, are all inextricably linked to American fascism and the continuum of the American fascist regime.
Capitalist.
As an educator, I think it's always important to sort of have some sort of shared language and understanding as we come into these sort of spaces and discussions, especially as it relates to fascism. Part of my work,
Capitalism.
both in community and in the classroom, is breaking down fascism. What is it? How does it take root? Many of us hear fascism and it evokes, you know, a feeling of unease. I remember I had a comrade who would just like wantonly say, at least at the moment, I thought it was like, you're just overusing fascism. Like, this is just fascist, right? Years later, I understand, like, yes, we live in a fucked up fascist world, right? But it evokes this unease, right? You know, images, Holocaust, gas chambers, things sort of start to come into motion, which I think is important, but at the same time, it also reduces fascism to this sort of one part of the world, one moment within history, and doesn't recognize fascism as something that has evolved, right? That has taken root and really sort of has a lot of its origins here within the US. I argue that fascism has its roots in European colonization, American settler colonialism, and Native American land dispossession.
All that means capitalism, because they define capitalism as private property ownership. When they're talking about fascism has its roots in settler colonialism and the stealing of Native American land and blah, 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 they're talking about the evil settler colonists, the Europeans who came to America, took the indigenous land that was owned by the collective and privatized it under the oppressive force of capitalism. That's what she means when she says that. To the left, fascism means capitalism. The difference between socialism and National Socialism is that National Socialism was inherently against Marxism. National Socialism also still allowed private property ownership. In fact, Hitler incentivized the having of children by basically saying that that you would basically get a free house in Germany if you had enough children, if you had like 4 children. And so that was still private property ownership that was incentivized by the government. So they very much believed in private property ownership. Also, National Socialism inherently implies nationalism. Nationalism means borders. Marxist, socialist, leftist, communists do not believe in borders at all. They don't believe in borders around your country, around your city, around your state, around your town, around your house. They don't believe in any borders. So there is no universe. If you've heard from James Lindsay and his retarded Twitter bullshit that socialism and National Socialism are the same thing, you need to dispel that from your brain, because it's retarded. The Nazis may not have been perfect. They certainly were not. I don't want anyone to think I'm a Nazi. I disavow Nazis. I disavow Hitler. I disavow World War II, all that bullshit. But I do know enough to know that private property ownership was allowed under National Socialism, and the elimination of private property ownership is explicitly what the communist left in America wants today. So that is the difference. It wasn't the same thing for reasons that I just explicitly explained. Let me go back in the chat. Could it be possible that when these people inject fascism or anti-fascism, are they No, they're not. No, I'm being explicit. When they say fascism, they mean capitalism. Everything these people do is about capitalism. Everything these people preach is about wanting to abolish capitalism. They are explicit about this. It is not confusing. There are absolutely socialists who believe that farmers were the first capitalists. Yes. Hang on, I'm just going through the chat, guys. Cool.
I look at how American fascism has influenced slavery and even
private property ownership.
Reconstruction. Today, we see fascism at work, certainly within our police departments across the country, at the ballot box, and our local school board meetings, which are just a fucking muck. and in the increasingly authoritarian language of many of our federal, state, and local leaders.
Hi, Luke. Good to see you.
So what is fascism? Again, I'm trying to give us some sort of shared language as an entry point for this discussion. And I actually want to share like this really cool slide. I promise you, it's not wordy at all. I think it's useful. Let's see what you all think. Share. Let's see if my tech works. All right. So I talk about fascism in community.
Yes, the police are capitalist. Yes.
Through these like
Thanks,
8
average
elements,
person.
which I hope will help us come together and have some synergy and confluence when we delve into what anti-fascism is. I start with saying that fascism is law and order on steroids. Authoritarianism is the sort of first key element.
Wow.
It's marked by this extreme militarism and police violence. Obviously, we think about Nazis and black shirts and Gestapo and SS, all those sorts of things. It's about literal discipline and punishment. It's about living under a police state. The sort of second element of fascism that I often get folks to think about is we oftentimes associate fascism with some sort of charismatic dictator, right? That postures this sort of, what I'll get to as a third, this anti-democratic or far-right nationalism. What I push back a little bit in my work is that fascism doesn't always have to have a singular dictator, right? I think fascism as a sort of cultural and social influence does absolutely rely on having some sort of talking head, right? That helps it sort of grow and amplifies the message. However, in America.
And by the way, this is why Black people can be considered white under this ideology, because to the left, whiteness is coded language for capitalist, bourgeois, private property owner. So when the left is saying things like calling Larry Elder the black face of white supremacy, or talking about multiracial whiteness in NPR and the Washington Post, what they're saying is someone who prospers within the system by owning more private property than other people. That's what they mean. When they say whiteness or white supremacy, they're only talking about the property owner, and anyone of any skin color can be the property owner. This is why Black businesses were targeted in Minneapolis during the Black Lives Matter riots, because those Black business owners had ascended to whiteness and were engaging in the ideology of the fascists, essentially.
Fascism, it's postured through our politicians, right? It's postured through even ordinary citizens that buy into some of the elements of authoritarianism. It shows up in our curriculum. It shows up in many aspects of society. So we don't necessarily solely need that charismatic dictator to denote that fascism is afoot and running amok. The third element of fascism, which gets to sort of the politics of it all, is that it is anti-democratic, it's nationalist, it's far right, meaning that there's a suppression of free speech, elections, voting. There is this push for a singular media sort of state narrative, national unity, expansion, this sort of belief in an expansion of empire, imperialism, or even for us, sort of American exceptionalism, right? A key part for understanding sort of how race and fascism are very much interconnected is that fascism is built upon the law, right? Fascism relies on the strength of the law to carry out the anti-democratic practices. And within that law, we oftentimes see this dual application of the law that I talk about.
This
in
is
my work,
Henry Giroux.
where there
makes
are certain
sense.
privileges that are granted to one group, typically those who are, I'll get to the racial purity stuff, but whiteness, right?
Whiteness.
While those
Property
same
owner.
protections and privileges are not granted to others, right? And in fact, the law is written and wielded in a very punitive way towards those who don't fit this sort of understanding of what race making under a sort of this fascist regime will look like, right? We typically talk about Aryan, Nordic, those sorts of things, and thinking about race and sort of fascist law in Europe. Fascism is fueled by racial capitalism, right? And that the landowners and the elites And all those folks that own the means of production oftentimes support the dictators.
Wait and see what she
Talk about
says.
our own oligarchs.
See, you're expecting her to say something around, I hate white people and I want to kill all the white people. That's what you're expecting her to say. That's not what she's going to say. She's going to talk about the system. She's going to talk about systemic racism, institutional racism. That's actually what she means.
Here and how they support and uplift the American
Getting really
fascist
sick of
regime,
distractions tonight, I'll tell you that.
exists here. Racial purity and sort of white supremacy is at its core, right? Fascism is about maintaining a singular sort of racial superiority belief. It's articulated usually in some sort of manifesto that is then codified in law. Obviously, over the last 2-3 weeks, we've been seeing lots on great replacement theory that again is sort of echoing that, again, this is a major element of fascism that we are continuing to see revealed over and over and over within our country. Genocide, ethnic cleansing is one that we see, right, in different forms. Sometimes it's very much overt. Other times it's more covert.
Why is it that dissident right-wingers don't listen any more than conservatives do? No, wrong, bro. Wrong. Wrong. The issue, Clump, is that you are only hearing what you want to hear. You are not listening to what... Okay. I'm going to be very, very blunt. I'm getting really tired of people pushing whatever narrative they have for their tribe in my chat tonight. I'm getting really sick of it. Because then I have to stop the stream and I have to go back and correct you because you're not fucking listening. You're not fucking listening. The other dissident right-winger is not listening because you guys are all so teed up about race all the fucking time that all you fucking hear is race and you don't hear anything else that doesn't support your fucking argument. No. No, no, no. No, no, no. No, no, no. You don't dictate how my stream works. Your job is to sit down, shut the fuck up, and listen. And if you don't want to do that, then leave. Good. My God.
Overt and sinister and thinking about histories of lynching.
No,
and
I am not. No,
assassination.
I am not going to close the chat. That is not part of the point. People are going to learn how to behave. And if they don't, I'm just going to end the stream early. And that's going to be the way it goes. We will only watch 2 presentations tonight instead of 4. Thank you. Because you're timed out because I fucking say so. Because you are spewing bullshit in the chat and I want to see it stop. Listen. If people don't cut, I'm just going to end the fucking stream. If people don't cut this shit out, I'm literally just going to end the stream. Like, I don't want to deal with this. Thank you for the super chat. I appreciate it. You time me out and you hurt my feelings. And just because I was spamming your chat with retarded fucking nonsense, just like I'm doing now, and I'm continuing to whine. Was I unclear when I said there was no whining allowed in my chat? Was I unclear that I do not give a flying fuck about your fucking feelings? Was I not fucking clear when I said only put stuff in the chat that is relevant to what is in the presentation? And now you just keep whining and whining and whining and whining and whining, and now you're getting timed out again. Thank you. Thank you, Ginger Green. I do appreciate it. Hey, we did hit goal. Look at that. All I got to do is yell. That's it. All I have to do is yell. And people send me money and I don't really understand why, but that's okay. Thank you. The dissident right-wingers are literally just as bad as the fucking MAGA conservatives, honestly. For people who are causing disruption, like literally everyone else wants you to shut up. Literally everyone else in the chat wants you to shut up. Whiteness means capitalism because whiteness is a reference to the property owner under slavery. Slavery is the ownership of people as private property. The reference being white to whiteness means people who did not work in the sun. That's what whiteness meant back when the term was invented. It meant the property owner who did not work in the sun. Black people can be white too. In fact, you know what? Let's just stop. We're going to go back to the video vaults. Hang on. Every fucking time I have to do this. Every fucking time. Where is it? We are about to watch videos from Cheryl Harris. Cheryl Harris wrote a famous paper called Whiteness as Property. This paper came out from Harvard Law Review in 1993. 20 years after Cheryl Harris wrote the paper Whiteness as Property, Cheryl Harris celebrated the 20th anniversary of the paper by giving a lecture at UCLA Law School. Let's listen to what Cheryl Harris, author of the paper Whiteness as Property, said about Black people being white too, that it has nothing to do with skin color, and it has everything to do with capitalism. Let's listen to what the actual leftists have to say instead of people working out their fucking feelings in the chat because they're dissident right-wingers who are obsessed with race all the fucking time.
Whiteness is not a skin color or even a racial type. It is a social relation constructed on exclusion, structural privilege, and its valorization.
Whiteness is not about skin color or even a racial type. It is about social relations based on exclusion, which means private property ownership because private property is inherently exclusive. Listen again.
Whiteness is not a skin color or even a racial type. It is a social relation constructed on exclusion, structural privilege, and its valorization.
No. You're not fucking listening. No. Bro, I'm literally playing you the fucking video. I am playing you the video right now that tells you what they believe. Do you want to listen again? Let's listen again.
Whiteness is not a skin color or even a racial type. It is a social relation constructed on exclusion, structural privilege, and its valorization.
Do I need to play it again? We have more videos to watch on this page. Do you want to keep talking about this, or do you want to actually listen to what's being said? See, this is the problem. This is the problem. And so I am not suggesting that there aren't very real realities concerning the white race that you guys are concerned with. I'm not suggesting those realities don't exist. What I am saying is that when the left says whiteness, they don't mean the same thing as you do. They're flat out telling you, and we're going to play it again because I want people to listen to this. This is not about skin color. It is not a racial type. It is a type of social relation.
Whiteness is not a skin color or even a racial type. It is a social relation constructed on exclusion, structural privilege, and its valorization.
All right, moving on. You do not have to have white skin to have access to whiteness. Listen.
Secondly, post-racialism's commitment to protect some value in whiteness, however relative, what Derek Bell called the promise not to be the face at the bottom of the well, it coexists with expanding whiteness to encompass non-whites. And I think Chuck was alluding to this a little bit yesterday. Post-racial whiteness is conditionally available to persons of any racial group, even some Blacks.
They are expanding beyond skin color to include Black people too. Hey, thanks for the was that Cash App or Rumble? Thank you to the Cash App or Rumble that someone just sent me for $5. I do, or not Rumble, Cash App or Venmo. Thank you for the Cash App or Venmo that someone just sent me for $5. I appreciate it. Again, they're expanding whiteness beyond beyond white skin color. Black people can be white too.
Secondly, post-racialism's commitment to protect some value in whiteness, however relative, what Derek Bell called the promise not to be the face at the bottom of the well, it coexists with expanding whiteness to encompass non-whites. And I think Chuck was alluding to this a little bit yesterday. Post-racial whiteness is conditionally available to persons of any racial group, even some blacks.
Post-racial whiteness is available to anyone of any racial group, including some blacks. And those blacks are the ones that own businesses, the ones that own private property, things like that. That is why Larry Elder is the black face of white supremacy, because he's a bourgeois capitalist. Now listen to them say that this is all about capitalism and private property ownership.
Post-racialism privileges self-designation. You are what you say you are. And post-racialism conceptualizes racial identity as private property on which the state cannot infringe.
Racial identity is
Post-racialism
private
privileges
property.
self-designation. You are what you say you are. And post-racialism conceptualizes racial identity as private property on which the state cannot infringe.
Thank you for the Cash App or Venmo that just came in. So someone just sent me a Cash App or Venmo saying, please don't end the stream. Okay. I won't end the stream. I know I'm upset. I'm upset when I have to say the same thing over and over and over again. Thank you, average person. I appreciate it. It just gets very frustrating when I have to do this like every single week. Now listen to video number 4. Whiteness means capitalism.
Rather than mobilizing a sense of linked fate that dismantling racial hierarchy is joined with addressing the problem of capitalism, these projects are placed in opposition, and the challenge to white entitlement or white privilege is then recast as an elitist, anti-populist project.
Again?
Rather than mobilizing a sense of linked fate that dismantling racial hierarchy is joined with addressing the problem of capitalism.
Dismantling racial hierarchy is adjoined with addressing the problem of capitalism. They're saying you can't solve racism without overthrowing capitalism. They're saying they are the same thing. Is anyone confused? Do I need to go back and play the videos again? Is anyone confused? Here is your chance to ask questions. Here is your chance to speak up and say, I don't get it. Do it now, because I'm not going to continue to tolerate it. Oh, go fuck yourself, Trendlin. Any dissident right-wingers still confused? It's fine to have concerns based on race. It really is. I don't personally care about that stuff, but I understand there are people who watch my content that do. Especially groypers and people who come from like the dissident right, okay? It's fine to have those concerns. However, what you need to understand is when you are listening to leftist content, they are not using the same language or definitions that you are. They have a completely different worldview. And so while it's fine to have those concerns and to talk about those concerns regarding race and white genocide and all that stuff, it's not the same thing. And you've got to stop conflating the two. Thank you for the Rumble rant, Ray. I appreciate it. Bourgeois means capitalism. It means private property ownership. All right, let's go back. What one? Not that one. This one. All right, we're continuing back with the main presentation now. There we go.
In this country, but we recognize that these are all sort of strategies that have an endpoint of dramatically reducing the living masses of folks who are on the racial and ethnic margins. And finally, fascism at its root is a sexist and hypermasculine project. You cannot talk about racial
No, it
purity
didn't.
and white supremacy
It was never
without
like that.
controlling thinking.
And if you would like a history of the term whiteness and racism, you can buy my book. It's called A Brief History of Racism, where I explicitly outline all of this. No, it had nothing to do with the white race. Those are your fifis. We're still arguing. We're still arguing. I swear to God.
Instituting policies.
All right, I'm just going to
that are
start banning
aimed at
people who aren't getting
controlling
it,
birthing
honestly.
people's bodies, historically and particularly women's bodies, right? You cannot talk about racial purity without talking about the current abortion movement, discussions on Roe. So I like to use this slide just to be able to give us some sort of shared language of how you identify fascism. What does it look like, right? Sometimes you'll have all these pieces, sometimes you'll have a few, but I'm gonna stop sharing from here and continue with my talk.
5 minutes to know.
Thank you. So this is how fascism works. These are the ingredients. When I first began researching on my early research project on Afro-Asian solidarity, I turned to the coalitional work of the Black Panther Party and how they engaged Asian American groups like the Red Guards and Asian American Political Alliance. In 1969, they host this really formative conference called the United Front Against Fascism conference in Oakland. They identify fascism as the main binding thread that was needed to organize in response to all of the sort of issues that they were experiencing on the ground. They would later create these national committees to combat fascism, the sort of, I guess, multiracial Black Panther Party chapters that focused more on mutual aid, survival, and community response work, right? Because that was the anti-fascist work that they saw was necessary, right? So not just feeding folks, but also supporting tenants and those that needed healthcare and were being preyed upon by slumlords and medical facilities. They saw how racial capitalism, again, through healthcare and through like housing rights was fueling fascism. These are the types of connections and discussions that I try to impart within my own community when it comes to understanding the totality of fascism and why anti-fascism must be a multiracial solidarity project. Anti-fascism is labor organizing, it is mutual aid work, it is abolitionist, it can be anarchist, it is art and cultural. There are art and cultural sort of anti-fascist strategies I talk about. It's within EJ work, right? It takes many forms, right? So that's how, as a sort of political educator and a classroom educator, I talk about fascism, right? I'm currently preparing for our community freedom school, which will be taking place in the next 2 weeks. Very much modeled in the spirit of the student nonviolent, the student nonviolent coordinating committees. And we're launching what we're calling sort of a series of experiential community-based modules that provide our community, primarily the North Side and Polytechnic communities in Fort Worth, with political education, foregrounding how to understand what fascism is, but also how to be anti-fascist in a very like intercommunal sense. So part of it is we cover and talk about movement history in our modules, right? We foreground our own community struggles. And this year is going to be really interesting because our Freedom School is happening. It's starting the week that the Atatiana Jefferson trial is starting. Atatiana Jefferson was a Black woman who was killed in her home in Fort Worth by a police officer that was conducting a wellness check in 2019. So the trial has been delayed. And so we're trying to leave room for within the programming to see how that trial will also take shape. So it's going to be a very challenging and interesting summer. Thank you. We do a lot around mutual aid work. We have a
mutual
really
aid,
dynamic
this is how they
program
fund
in the city called Funky Town Fridge, and we feed hundreds of Fort Worth natives via community refrigerators that are all around the city. We're doing some modules on skill-based campaign building and power mapping and understanding how political leadership, again, is sort of bolstering fascism within the city and within the state. Our LGBTQIA youth that are very much involved in the organization are very much interested in providing sort of joyful reprieve spaces, in particular for our trans youth of color that have been disproportionately targeted by the Texas state legislature. And another sort of module that if I had time, I would talk through a little bit more is some of the EJ work that we've been doing and doing these sort of field trips to, well, not even field trips because they're in our backyard.
Do you want me to tell you how many fundraising emails I get from the Trump administration and the Libertarian Party? Do you really think that socialists are the only ones who try to raise money for things? I get, at minimum, a dozen texts every single day from different Republican groups that are asking me for money. I get emails from the libertarians all the fucking time asking me for money. Do you really think that the socialists are the only ones who ask for resources? You are saying that, and I'm sick of the commentary. I've asked you to stop several times. Okay, time out then. Fine, we can play this game.
Millions
Fine.
of Texans live within a mile of a natural gas or oil site. And so teaching folks how to do citizen science
Every
work
goddamn time,
in terms
I swear to
of
God.
soil data and air pollution collection to be able to advocate for safer and better communities and how to clean those contaminated sites is all, these are anti-fascist projects. We frame them as that. Reframe the work as that. And I think it's important because it instills an understanding of how fascism really is the root of many of the evils that we see unfolding within our city and our state and our nation. I'm going to stop there because I'm sure I'm going to go over time. But if you have questions, I look forward to them during our Q&A. Fighting ICE is fighting fascism. Yes.
Fighting ICE is
thanks so
fighting
much, Janelle.
fascism.
We'll hand it over to Charisse.
Good afternoon, everybody. So Bill graciously introduced me as an organizer. I am an academic who has recently joined an organization. I still hesitate to call myself an organizer because I'm still learning.
Versus,
but I am a member of the Black Alliance for Peace. I am the co-coordinator of the research and political education team, and I am growing toward being an organizer. But in true academic fashion, I'm going to read a paper that's about the sort of longue durée of fascism with, yes, thank you, Pelletier versus Chazwi, with sort of thinking about Black people at the center of how we understand a sort of US enunciation of fascism, particularly after World War II, not least because I do believe that history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes, as the saying goes. And so much of the things that we're recognizing about the uptick in fascism or sort of fascistic political economy and social relations today are not new. They've just reappeared in their particular articulation. So on January 6, 2021, a mob of white supremacists, white nationalists, and neo-Nazi elements, including the Oath Keepers, 3%ers, Proud Boys, and Boogaloo Boys, stormed the Capitol in an attempt to undermine the 2020 election results and the transfer of power from Trump to Biden. The attack was in part a response to the return of power to the Democratic Party, which has a more diverse and progressive base, more progressive, but not necessarily objectively progressive, base that reflects the changing demographics of US society. In true cross-class collaboration, the event was financially supported by members of the 1%, including the wife of Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, hedge fund heiress Rebecca Mercer, and Julie Jenkins Finch.
Hey, Clump, what do you think she's talking about when she says the event was supported by the 1%? What do you think she's talking about when she says who supported all those evil fascists and white supremacists? Oh, it was the capitalists, wasn't it? You want to be a smartass in my chat?
Of the Publix supermarket chain. These events have been variously described as a coup, an insurrection, a riot, a violent protest, and treason. And as hearings about the insurrection continue, more details emerge that hint at collusion or spell out collusion outright at many levels. Their election of duty and the participation of scores of police officers former military personnel, and elected officials from around the country, in addition to working class and petty bourgeois elements. And so that cross-class collaboration is essential and actually foundational to fascism. So many have called January 6th a harbinger for, or indeed a manifestation of fascism in the United States. Many contend that Trumpism inaugurated fascism in our times, and such claims are not without merit. So like Janelle, in terms of presenting sort of what we mean by fascism, I will draw on the 2003 article titled Fascism Anyone by Lawrence W. Britt, who identified 14 characteristics of fascism based on his study of regimes in Germany, Indonesia, Italy, Spain, and several Latin American countries. The first is powerful and continuing nationalism. And we see this, for example, in the—
Oh, you're telling me that the first characteristic of fascism is nationalism? That means borders. That means capitalism.
Position of U.S. foreign policy imperatives, even on its own allies, and an ongoing challenge to any attempt at multipolarity through, for example, the Cold War with China. We see disdain for human rights, or the second element is disdain for human rights, and we see this,
disdain for
example,
human rights.
the recent Supreme Court case, which reduced the rights of the imprisoned to challenge their imprisonment, even if they're innocent. Right, that is a fundamental attack on human rights. The third element is the construction of enemies or scapegoats as a source of unification, and of course, we see the continued demonization of Antifa, the radical left, socialism, and even the progressive wing of the Democratic Party. The fourth element is military supremacy, again manifested in the United States' ongoing hawkish foreign policy. The fifth—
the demonization of Antifa is proof that we live in a fascist society. Okay.
Element is rampant sexism. And we, of course, are seeing this particularly with the attack on Roe and all of these state-level policies that are meant to undermine women's reproductive health, of course, which have a disproportionate effect on racialized and working class and poor women. The next element is controlled mass media. We know that the mainstream media is literally the sort of media arm of the state. They just simply parrot whatever the police or the state tell them to say. Obsession with national security is the next element. And we see this with the quote, defense budget, right? That increases every single year, and it's all but defensive. It is offensive, and it's actually a sort of pipeline to enrich Raytheon and Boeing and other private financial corporations. The next is the lack of separation between government and religion. The next is aggressive protection of corporate power. We saw this with trillions being made by corporations, why millions and millions have suffered economically. The next element is the suppression of labor. And then finally, there's a disdain for intellectuals and artists. And this is manifested, for example, contemporarily with the attack on critical—
All right. She just went through the entire list of what makes a fascist society. What was missing from the list? What did she not mention in the list at all regarding fascism? Hey, Tina, do me a favor. Explain to me, please, why the left supports abortion. You know everything. You already know they want state-subsidized abortion. Hey, good for you. Do you know why? Do you have any idea why? Do you know what part of the leftist plan abortion actually supports? Please explain to us in the chat. What did they leave out? Yeah, I didn't hear them talk about race at all. There was no mention of race at all. We're going to go back and listen to the whole list again. There was absolutely zero mention of race at all in any way. Listen.
Station of fascism in the United States. Many contend that Trumpism inaugurated fascism in our times, and such claims are not without merit. So like Janelle, in terms of presenting sort of what we mean by fascism, I will draw on the 2003 article titled Fascism Anyone by Lawrence W. Britt, who identified 14 characteristics of fascism based on his study of regimes in Germany, Indonesia, Italy, Spain, and several Latin American countries. The first is powerful and continuing nationalism.
No.
And we see this, for example—
No. Tina, you're in my fucking classroom. You don't dictate to me what to do. The question to you is, why does the left support abortion? You want to come in my chat and be like, excuse me, we already know that the left supports abortion subsidized by the state. Can you teach us anything else? Why does the left support abortion? You know everything. You want to come in my chat and dictate to me? Why does the left support abortion? That is the question you are being asked to answer. If you do not answer that question, I will put you in a timeout to prevent you from speaking for the rest of the stream. If you chat in anything other than the answer or saying, I don't know, you will be put in a timeout and you will not be allowed to talk for the rest of the stream.
And the imposition of U.S. foreign policy imperatives, even on its own allies, and an ongoing challenge to any attempt at multipolarity through, for example, the Cold War with China. We see disdain for human rights, or the second element is disdain for human rights. And we see this, for example, with the recent Supreme Court case, which reduced the rights of the imprisoned to challenge their imprisonment, even if they're innocent, right? That is a fundamental attack on human rights. The third element is the construction of enemies or scapegoats as a source of unification. And of course, we see the continued demonization of Antifa, the radical left, socialism, and even the progressive wing of the Democratic Party. The fourth element is military supremacy, again, manifested in the United States' ongoing hawkish foreign policy.
I did not ask anyone to answer that question except for Tina. The only person who should be answering that question is Tina. We're still waiting for her answer.
The fifth element is rampant sexism. And we, of course, are seeing this particularly with the attack on Roe and all of these state-level policies that are...
People were asking about the nuclear family. That's your hint, Tina. That's your hint. People were asking, did they mention the nuclear family on the list? What she just said was your hint.
Meant to undermine women's reproductive health, of course, which have a disproportionate effect on racialized and working class and poor women. The next element is controlled mass media. We know that the mainstream media is literally the sort of media arm of the state. They just simply parrot whatever the police or the state tell them to say. Obsession with national security is the next element. And we see this with the quote, defense budget, right? That increases every single year, and it's all but defensive. It is offensive, and it's actually a sort of pipeline to enrich Raytheon and Boeing and other private financial corporations. The next is the lack of separation between government and religion. The next is aggressive protection of corporate power. We saw this with trillions being made by corporations, why millions and millions have suffered economically. The next element is the suppression of labor. And then finally, there's a disdain for intellectuals and artists. And this is manifested, for example, contemporarily with the attack on critical race theory, which is everything and nothing, right? It's anything that challenges the 1776 mythology. So the material conditions we're facing, which have been
So critical race theory is anything that challenges the 1776 mythology. And that's the only reference to race in their entire spiel about here are all the elements of fascism. Does everyone get it? Hey, Tina, we're still waiting for your answer. You've got 30 seconds to answer the question that I asked you, or I'm going to put you in a timeout for the rest of the chat or the rest of the stream. We are still waiting for Tina to tell us what is the purpose of abortion on the left. Because Tina knows everything and she doesn't need to listen because she already knows everything. Okay, well, you're going to prove it now, Tina. Time's ticking. Tick tock. Tick tock, Tina. We're still waiting for your answer. Do 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 psh do psh do bum bum. Hey, thanks for the Cash App. I appreciate it, Tina. Last chance, or you're getting banned for the rest of the stream. What is the purpose of abortion on the left? People always think I'm joking when I say I'm going to do this, but I'm yet never joking. Let me find Tina because she needs to go in a timeout. All right, Tina's not answering us. Does anyone? So Tina has been put in a timeout. Tina is going to be in a timeout for the rest of the stream. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. Does anyone else want to answer the question? Does anyone else have any idea what the answer is? What is the purpose of abortion to the far left? To free women from doing the unpaid labor of raising the next generation of proletarian workers? Yup. Having babies supports and propagates further capitalism? Kind of, but not really. Kind of. Women are replicating workers within the capitalist system. You guys aren't getting it yet. It does have to do with the family, but that's not the only thing it has to do with. Reagan got it. Abortion is to liberate women from doing the unpaid labor of birth. Well, okay, no. Reagan didn't get it. Reagan got half of it. Guys, the patriarchy. Yes. What about the patriarchy? What does this have to do with the patriarchy? What does abortion have to do with the patriarchy? What does abortion have to do with the patriarchy, guys? There it is. Abortion frees women from the gender binary. It frees women from the patriarchy. That is the gender hierarchy, the oppressive hierarchy created by capitalism. When capitalism created the social constructs of men and women based on their ability to reproduce, essentially. Abortion on demand frees women from the patriarchy. It frees women from being part of the oppressive gender binary system, which in turn will eventually lead to the abolition of the nuclear family, which the nuclear family is the means of reproduction of capitalism. So that is what the answer is. Well done to everyone who got it right. Too bad for Tina not even trying.
Exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic, extraordinary inflation, and war, are not unlike the conditions that led to the rise of fascism in the 1920s and 1930s. Interestingly, scholars, organizers, activists, and journalists operating in what I call the tradition of radical Blackness offered a similar analysis of U.S. society following World War II by analyzing the dire situation of Black Americans. I define radical Blackness as communist, socialist, anti-capitalist, and/or revolutionary analyses of the structural and
I'm sorry. What was that? I define radical Blackness as communism, socialism, and anti-capitalism. Hey, Clump, you still here? I define radical Blackness as communism, socialism, and anti-capitalism. Uh-huh. She means someone who works in the sun. Exactly. Yep. And this is, remember, this is the Black history professor. Again, please.
Scholars, organizers, activists, and journalists operating in what I call the tradition of radical Blackness offered a similar analysis of U.S. society following World War II by analyzing the dire situation of Black Americans. I define radical Blackness as communist, socialist, anti-capitalist, and/or revolutionary analyses of the structural and material conditions of local, national, and global Blackness, and efforts to imagine and bring into being liberating possibilities for all oppressed people. It centers critical political economy analysis, attends to interracial class conflict and antagonism, theorizes the international character of Blackness as a special condition of surplus value extraction, and strives for the eradication of—
Wait. Are you shitting me? Are you shitting me? Hang on, listen to this one part.
Theorizes the international character of Blackness as a special condition of surplus value extraction.
The international characteristic of Blackness as the special condition of surplus by extraction. That means private property ownership. That means producing profit on the back of the proletariat. The surplus is what they refer to as the profit margin.
And strives for the eradication of capitalist exploitation.
Oh, it strives through Blackness strives for the eradication of capitalist exploitation. You don't say. Because surplus extraction is a means of capitalist exploitation. Does everyone understand? Shall we listen again?
By analyzing the dire situation of Black Americans. I define radical Blackness as communist, socialist, anti-capitalist, and/or revolutionary analyses of the structural and material conditions of local, national, and global Blackness, and efforts to imagine and bring into being liberating possibilities for all oppressed people. It centers critical political economy analysis, attends to interracial class conflict and antagonism, theorizes the international character of Blackness as a special condition of surplus value extraction, and strives for the eradication of capitalist exploitation. Racialization is...
Does anyone have any questions about what was just said? This is why whiteness means capitalism. It has nothing to do with skin color. It has to do with the system that upholds racism. The system that upholds racism is capitalism. That's what they mean when they say systemic racism or institutional racism. Does everyone understand? I'm doing a quick pause. I know there's a delay between when I say something and when you guys hear it. Why do you think Nick likes me so much? I'm honestly curious. I don't even know if Nick does I think Nick likes me to a certain extent, but why do you think Nick likes me so much? Let me know. Is it because I yell at my audience worse than he does? All right, let's keep going.
Extraction and strives for the eradication of capitalist exploitation. Racialization is understood to emanate from the capitalist mode of production in which both Blackness and radicalism become threats to property relations, labor hierarchies, and forms of accumulation and expropriation that constitute the capitalist world economy. Informed by and engaged with real world struggles, radical Blackness.
She literally just keeps talking. She literally just keeps saying more and more about how it relates to capitalism. Hey, thanks, Suzanne. She uses a lot of pretty words. She does. Yeah, you noticed that, didn't you, Richard? Blackness doesn't mean people with black skin color. Blackness means all oppressed people. What do you think that means, Richard? Or anyone? What do you think they mean when they say all oppressed people? Blackness doesn't mean black skin color. It means everyone is oppressed by... What do you think she means? All oppressed people. Well, yes, the proletariat, yeah, but keep going. What else does she mean? Radical Blackness is basically busting rhymes the hell out of his... Well, I don't know about that, but I do appreciate the money. Thank you. What does all oppressed people mean, guys? You guys aren't getting it right yet. Shit. Hang on. You guys have until I fix my banner to get the answer right. Okay, the correct answer is that Blackness means everyone oppressed by capitalism, and the left believes that every single person is oppressed by capitalism, even the capitalists. So when they're saying this is not about skin color, this is about everyone who's oppressed, everyone is oppressed by capitalism.
Exploitation. Racialization is understood to emanate from the capitalist mode of production in which both Blackness and radicalism become threats to property relations, labor hierarchies, and forms of accumulation and expropriation.
I'm sorry, this is just so perfect. We have to really go slow here. Hang on.
Strives for the eradication of capitalist exploitation. Racialization is understood to emanate from the capitalist mode of production.
What did she say? Hang on.
Racialization is understood to emanate from the capitalist mode of production. And
racialization emanates from the capitalist mode of production. Race comes from capitalism. Race is a social construct created by capitalism.
Which both Blackness and radicalism become threats to property relations.
Blackness and radicalism become threats to property relations. That means private property.
Labor hierarchies and forms of accumulation.
Labor hierarchies, that's bourgeois versus proletariat. Forms of accumulation means amassing private property or equity.
And expropriation that constitute the capitalist world economy.
And all of that constitutes the capitalist world economy. That's what they mean, guys. They're being extremely... The Black Studies professor is telling you that Blackness is about radical anti-capitalist ideology.
Informed by and engaged with real world struggles, radical Blackness encompasses African descendants' multivalent and persistent anti-systemic and counter-hegemonic challenges to political economies and legitimating discourses that sustain racialized and gendered exploitation, exclusion, dispossession, and class-based domination. It is often routed through or enunciated from within the United States, given the latter's importance to the development of the capitalist world economy since the 17th century, its rise to global hegemony after World War II, and histories of anti-Black racial oppression and terror rooted in capitalist imperialism. As such, radical Blackness has various
anti-Black oppression is rooted in capitalist imperialism.
Its rise to global hegemony after World War II, and histories of anti-Black racial oppression and terror rooted in capitalist imperialism. As such, radical Blackness has variously been targeted by US authorities as extremism, authoritarianism, and terrorism to rationalize the use of extraordinary force, violence, and exclusion. So in the petition, we charge genocide, the historic petition to the United Nations for relief from a crime of the United States government against the Negro people. It is a long name. William L. Patterson and the Civil Rights Congress conveyed that the threat of fascism.
Capitalism is literally genociding Blackness
in the United States in the aftermath of the Second World War was all too real.
Wow.
And one of its striking features was the spike in violence against Black people. The charge of genocide was meant to save bourgeois democracy from the capitalist machinations, which might well lead to fascism. And they said that this should be a matter of concern to all who were conscious of the evils of racism, and that these were among the foremost roots of capitalism. As World War II gave way to the Cold War, the United States consolidated its global hegemony with policies and practices that were eerily reminiscent of what they call Hitlerism. In the US case, however, as had been the reality.
The United States is literally Hitler. Hitlerism. We've reached the Hitlerism stage of the presentation.
Historically, the target was those of African descent. Likewise, when collaboration with the Soviet Union against the Axis powers quickly descended into confrontation, communism and adjacent forms of radicalism became primary targets of US foreign and domestic policy.
Oh, yeah?
Such anti-radicalism was meant to terrorize African Americans, attenuate the gains made.
Anti-communism was meant to terrorize African Americans
by labor and control forms of militancy that after 1945 were construed by all three branches of government of the US government as foreign inspired and threatening to the stability and security of the United States. As We Charge Genocide will argue, the rise of US fascism could be gleaned in the interconnection of genocide against Black people in the United States and US imperialism abroad. As such, the curtailment of the former was the key to ending the latter. Additionally, these thinkers in the early Cold War sensed the threat of fascism in the increasingly draconian.
Okay, pause. I'm derailing my own class. Can we try to psyop James Lindsay into using the term Hitlerism? Can we just do that? I know there are people watching right now that are not yet blocked by James on Twitter. Can we all work together to psyop James into getting him to unironically using the term Hitlerism? Can we all work on that? And if you are blocked by him, maybe create another account at some like everyone's just gonna have to take one for the team and create another Twitter account. I think that would be a really good idea. We need to find someone who will pretend to be James's friend, who will lovingly introduce him to the idea of Hitlerism.
Anti-communist policies adopted by the US government. Domestic subversion was targeted by an anti-radical state apparatus that comprised a network of government organizations, including the State Department and the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the Justice Department, congressional committees, including the House Committee on American Activities, instrumentalities like the Attorney General's list of subversive organizations, and key Supreme Court decisions like Dennis v. United States, which was decided in 1951. So all of that to say, all three branches of government are foundational to US fascism. 5 minutes, Bill? Got it. Okay, perfect.
All three branches of government are foundational to US fascism.
And so it's not only all three branches of government, but it's also there's all of these different apparatuses that work together to sort of codify fascism in the law and in policy and practice. And so there are a number of pieces of legislation that are integral to this, including the 1938 Foreign Agents Registration Act, the 1939 Hatch Act, the 1940 Voorhees Act, the Alien Registration Act of 1940, the Taft-Hartley Act of 1947, and a whole bunch of executive orders. I'm not going to go through all of these in the interest of time, but these entities, among others, work together to construct discourses of un-Americanist subversion and threat to national security. At the top of the list were those who needed to be rooted out, or excuse me, at the top of the list of those who needed to be rooted out were the communists and their sympathizers, which was a broad designation that included anyone who disagreed with or criticized the US government's Cold War politics, including peace activists, civil rights leaders, dissident artists, and progressive labor organizers of all types. US communists and fellow travelers, especially those of African descent and foreign origin, were particularly sensitive to attacks on their freedom of speech, press, and association by the anti-radical state apparatus, which they interpreted as the first step towards fascism on their own shores. Black Chicago Communist Party leader Claude Lightfoot, for example, noted the negative trifecta that arose after World War II, which was the Cold War, the escalation of a fascist danger at home, and the violent return of the lynch mob. He said, quote, "The nation had not experienced a period like this since the days of the Alien and Sedition laws," end quote. Of particular concern regarding the rise of fascism was a provision of the McCarran Act that gave the president the right during a national emergency to take control of all institutions of government and put people in jail without trial. And by the way, that aspect of the McCarran Act has never been overturned. So in the declaration of a national emergency, we can all be like put in concentration camps if you have a security index card. Anyway, the Black radical
We're
poet
all
Langston
going to go in
Hughes had similar
concentration
misgivings
camps
about
now?
the Smith
Okay,
Act.
great.
Regarding the June 20th, 1948 indictment of 11 CPUSA leaders, he noted, quote, "First, Hitler locked up the communists. The Jews were number 2. In America, the Negroes are number 2 on history's list. If the 12 communists are sent to jail, in a little while, they will send Negroes to jail simply for being Negroes and to concentration camps just for being colored," end quote.
Hey, Rich, I know you guys think that you're owning the libs when you say they're reading off a script. This is what they do. This is what they've done every single week that you've been watching Socialism Saturday. You are not new here. You have seen them read off scripts over and over and over again. You're trying to imply someone wrote a script for them to read off because they're paid protesters. They are academics, bro. This is what they do. They write a paper, they write a speech, and then they read off of it. This is why the Q&A is always the most interesting, because they don't have their speech to read. But you know this, and now you're trying to own the libs, and it's annoying as fuck. You've been here long enough. You should not be surprised by this.
From a prison cell in Terre Haute, Indiana, the former New York City councilman and Black communist paragon Benjamin J. Davis Jr. correspondingly argued that impending fascism in the United States was most manifest in the oppression of Black people. He said, toward the end of World War II, the pro-fascist Negro-hating forces, which have been held in check during the war, began to break loose. The first section of the population to feel the rigors of reaction was, of course, the Negro people. They were forcibly reminded that the Negro was still the victim of a system of national oppression and segregation. American imperialism had not changed its spots. I have this whole part about Claudia Jones, but essentially she makes a similar argument about how the reactionary elements of monopoly capitalism came together with big business and the elements of
actually, this is like unironically a great point. Turning Point USA, they're reading prepared speeches right now at Turning Point USA. Are there liberals in the Turning Point USA chat going, you guys are reading off speeches and that means you're obviously paid protesters? No, because it's a retarded talking point. It's always been a retarded talking point. When people talk in public, generally they're not speaking extemporaneously. They're actually preparing remarks. Sometimes they even use teleprompters when they're being really fancy.
Anti-Black racial oppression, to buttress imperialism, and to sort of portend this rise of fascism.
2 minute series.
Okay. So a particularly pernicious event that happened in the post-World War II moment that immediately came to mind as the events of January 6, 2020 were unfolding, 2021 were unfolding, is the Peekskill riots. This terrible event took place on August 27, 1949, at this concert that the Harlem chapter of the Civil Rights Congress organized, at which essentially Paul Robeson was scheduled to sing. They were attacked by this vicious mob of police officers, white supremacists, and some government officials. Not to be deterred, they met again the next week on September 4th, 1949. They were again attacked. Over 200 people were injured, and over 900 police officers on the scene sided with, aided, and encouraged that attack. The governor of New York, Thomas Dewey, went on to blame the riot not on the white supremacists, but on a communist plot. And interestingly, I don't know if you all remember, right after January 6th happened, some of the Congress people were trying to say that it was Antifa that had infiltrated this mob, right? So again, the communists, the radicals, the left-wing people often become the scapegoat. So there's so much more to say about this post-World War II moment and how the context of demobilization and the increase in violence against Black people for these Black radicals portended this rise of fascism. But what I'll say is that on this analysis, we can see why the January 6, 2021 attack, in tandem with ongoing anti-Black police lynchings, the imposition of draconian sanctions on countries throughout the world, from Venezuela to Zimbabwe to Iran, and the recent attempt to leave Nicaragua, Cuba, and Venezuela out of the Summit of the Americas, U.S. supported fascist and right-wing regimes, including its dog whistling around the recent Colombia elections, billions upon billions spent for war, while the milquetoast Build Back Basic bill, also known as Build Back Better, with its pretense of social welfare, is moribund. The attack on women's reproductive rights and the criminalization and demonization of Antifa and Black Lives Matter, in contradistinction to the lax approach to white marauders who stormed the Capitol, portend the rise of fascism. Last point. Like those in the tradition of radical Blackness who analyzed and organized against the rise of fascism after the Second World War, we would do well to have a broader understanding of what attacks on democracy actually look like, how they're rooted in anti-Black racial oppression, anti-radicalism, and the defense of capital against society, and how these things are not reducible to Donald Trump's influence. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Charisse. Ben, take it away.
Hey y'all, really happy to be here. Presentations have been great so far. The conference in general has been great so far. Really great attendance. Thanks so much to all that have been helping organize and contributing to the discussion. I'm not an academic like my comrades before me. So I'm going to focus more on kind of like our organizing experiences here in Denver, because we've had quite a few interactions and experience with thanks with the FASH out here in Denver. So I'm going to talk about those a little bit. I'm going to share my screen right quick to get that out of the way. How's that look for everybody? Good?
Good, yeah. Yeah.
All right, great. So over the past several years, centering around the George Floyd uprising, the Denver communists, our local anti-fascist comrades, have had several direct encounters with the right-wing, pro-cop, conservative, anti-choice, anti-vax, the wannabe fascists, and the explicitly fascist contingent in Denver. These encounters have included lots and lots of internet trolling, physical altercations, facing off and heckling, court harassment, chat infiltration, and even death. Despite the far right's best efforts, the loose anti-fascist coalition of Denver has succeeded in reducing the influence and presence of the far right in almost every form. Cool, so I'm gonna tell a couple stories. We got some slides just from our experiences, some shots over the last several years of organizing against the fascists and the far right. So right here, we got, does that look good? Is that good for everybody? Yeah. Right here, we have some proper Nazis, some
proper
good old-fashioned
Nazis.
Hitler Nazis. These are some cats that have been around Denver for a lot, and we've encountered them several times. The picture to the left was taken at a comic book store that was hosting a a queer drag afternoon on Sundays, and these fash would come out and heckle the queer kids that were coming out to do that. So we showed up that several times to help protect and escort kids into the comic book. Why isn't it going? There we go. Well, we got good old-fashioned America dads, your classic suburban conservative, America-loving, gun-toting dads. These shots were all from a car caravan that we took through a neighborhood in Aurora to go to an ICE warden's house. Yeah. We got the classic like anti-vax, Anon and homophobes. Some Boogaloo Boys, the Proud Boys are mixed in there. Lots of anti-vaxxers. That whole kind of like group of people. The alt-right incel provocateurs. This is a guy who was around a lot a couple years ago who used to dox and take pictures of
those damn
activists.
Incels. They ruined everything.
The doxing honestly resulted in virtually no consequence to any leftists after like the kind of initial panic that your picture and personal information could be shared on far right networks and stuff like that. Several of our members were doxed and no real consequences ever came of that besides just like the kind of the freakiness. There's the frat gang fash, the Proud Boys. These guys would show up a lot with this kind of like yellow looking gear. And the picture on the left is when they showed up to a court date for one of our comrades who had gotten a charge. And of course, court dates are all public public information. Everybody can see it. And so they would use that opportunity to show up and harass us. And so we, of course, would organize court support systems to have our members and other comrades show up and help protect and keep people safe. There's the Patriot Militia fash. This tattoo on his left hand is a 3%er tattoo. This specific picture was actually taken of a cop who had a couple years earlier had murdered Paul Castro.
Oh yeah? It's hard to take the protest scene seriously, huh? Well, why would that be? Because you're watching a presentation where they're saying things you don't like? So that means you're ignoring that there are still riots going on in Los Angeles to this very day. That means you're ignoring that Antifa is basically running downtown Portland right now. That means you're ignoring the protests that are going to happen this week because there's going to be mass protests all over the country, probably more than 1,000 events on a Thursday happening this week. You're ignoring what is about to start happening on college campuses again once college comes back into session in the fall. You're ignoring that right now across the Southwest and the South, they are organizing over 10 million people via phone banking and texting and all that stuff. I've talked about it on the channel twice this week. Because of a couple slides in the presentation, you don't take any of this seriously anymore. Are you fucking stupid? Are you fucking stupid? This is the dumbest thing you've said yet all night. I just can't take protests seriously because of a presentation that was given 3 years ago that's kind of funny, bro. It should make you take it more seriously, not less seriously. Because guess what? These people are winning. These people are winning and you are losing. So if you don't take it seriously because haha, some of their presentations are funny, like how retarded does that make you?
Away, who's a Lakota man here in Denver, and whose family we've done a lot of organizing with over the years, trying to bring justice to his family, but also
awesome, Ray. Thank you.
Raising awareness about indigenous murders by the police.
There were literally two different like shootings this week. You guys understand that, right? There was a mass attack on an ICE facility in Texas by like 10 Antifa members who were all armed with AR-15s, right-wingers. I just don't take this seriously because of a presentation from 3 years ago. How fucking stupid, honestly. Exactly. The right is not organized like this.
This is more kind of patriot militia fash. These guys really crack me up. Quotes like UADF recon team standing by in Denver, hashtag ghost, hashtag 16 seconds. I think these guys are pretty funny. They're always posting some kind of like really over the top patriotic, thinly veiled messaging. And they show up to actions kind of dressed like this, with their like paramilitary, like Walmart hunting gear looking stuff, trying to act tough and be big. And then this is another one, the Colorado Unorganized Constitutional Militia, pronounced CUCM. Don't know where their marketing team went on that one, but that's what they chose. And this was a document that was some of their rules of engagement that we had gotten through one of our comrades infiltrated one of their like secure chats. And so we got some of their documents talking about their rules of engagement. And this is some of the pages from that manual. This whole manual is kind of is characterized by a group of people that want to simultaneously uphold the law while also understanding, or while also thinking that the law doesn't go far enough. So they're kind of caught in this like brown shirt position of wanting to help out law enforcement and support the boys in blue, while also being enraged that oppressed people everywhere are standing up to police oppression and to fascism everywhere. This is more from that. They have like a little gear list. They have listed here zip ties and at least $20 in cash. A couple ripped up T-shirts for gags and blindfolds. So they're trying to like kind of kidnap leftist activists, BLM, and anti-fascist activists. We are seeing our republic under attack from Marxists that aim to destroy everything we have ever built in the last 2.5 centuries. We can't let her succumb to Marxism and anarchy. These are the kind of like over the top, like real melodramatic kind of like appeals that characterize a lot of these fascist publications. There's your regular old biker racists, kind of a classic group. A lot of them veterans, a lot of them that kind of thing. This guy on the right here will be featured in a couple of slides later, in a story later. The bikers against radical Islam. I'm not sure when this picture was taken, but they showed up to an action that was the coalition to close the concentration camp. They showed up to an action, probably like 20 of them, a couple years back, and really didn't do much besides kind of stand around the whole time. But yeah, they're kind of around in Denver. And then we've had several kind of like face-offs with these like kind of militia-looking fascist types. You can kind of see the like military regalia that they have on. This was a relatively early night during the George Floyd uprising, when this group of, I think there was like maybe 20 or 30 of them, kind of came up behind a protest and started like shining flashlights on us and yelling things. And so a couple of the George Floyd protesters kind of turned around and confronted them and ended up backing them way down several.
Just to be really clear, although I appreciate their efforts in bringing a lawsuit, you should be under no illusion that that's going to change anything. Antifa does not care if you bring a lawsuit. They're not going to stop what they're doing. They're only going to get worse. Just because they brought a lawsuit doesn't mean the city is going to change what they're doing. Probably nothing is going to happen. Probably they're just going to settle out of court. And I like the woman that brought that lawsuit. She's a nice lady, but she's probably going to get a payout, and that's going to be good for her. And I don't mind that at all. But if you're under any illusion that that's going to stop Antifa, that's naive at best.
Several blocks down until the cops finally came and kind of saved them, and then we took off.
Oh my God!
The second face-off. This is later.
Oh my God! No, Portland has not started to wake up. That is fundamentally untrue. Just because one person brought a lawsuit and you're seeing things from your favorite influencers on Twitter does not mean that Portland has started to wake up.
George Floyd rebellion. I think this is at the police station. We had gone to the police station to, a protest, and another large group here we go. Another kind of large group of these fascist groups or fascists came up behind us. We had another kind of another face-off. This is another one. You can kind of see them there with their like shields and knee pads, and one of them, this guy always brings his German Shepherd with him as like an attack dog or something.
Well,
but it always like looks.
And I'm going to tell you this: she knows this too. She is aware. I promise you, she is aware of this. But this is exactly right. The only reason that the conservative influencers are talking about that lady in Portland is because she's Black. I promise you. And she is aware of that, but she has a point she wants to make as well. And, more power to her. I hope she gets a good settlement. I really do. She is a very nice woman. She's, and she does. And the thing about that lady too, she doesn't even want to be involved in any of this. She does not want to be famous on the internet. She doesn't want to clout chase. She just wants things to change, and then she wants to go back and live her life. And that's like all she wants. But
it's like the sweetest dog in the world, and I'm sure wants nothing more than to just like get a treat and some pets. This is some more shots. We are everywhere and unstoppable. My swastika, some of our local cats in the bottom left that I think moved out of the city.
5 minutes.
Another face-off. Thank you. This is another shot of that. We got shot with frozen paintballs at some point. All this.
No cops.
So in 2020,
no KKK,
there was a large
no
Police
fascist
Appreciation
USA.
Day, which is held every year in the Greek amphitheater. So it's a big police appreciation day, and every year the Denver left comes down and kind of snuffs it out. This was the year of George Floyd, so numbers for this counter protest were really large, and the counter protest ended up getting pretty violent. We kind of forced these like pro coppers out of the city, and then the following year we ended up organizing with a couple of Black women who were like fresh out of high school. And we were marching with them all during George Floyd, and they reached out to us asking for help to organize the counter protest, the anti-police rally. And because we had opposed it so harshly the year before, they had like maybe 30 people that ended up coming out to this one. So the numbers were vastly reduced, almost comically reduced. Then this is the BLM Antifa soup drive. I'm just going to skip over this honestly, but basically this is the event where they were having a patriot muster. We of course threw a counter protest to try to counter that. And then here's a shot of some of us, the conflict kind of escalating. And then this is the guy from earlier, the biker fascist, who ends up getting killed from a Fox News or a News 9 security detail who is there. And then this is a slide that we had made for that. The necessity, and then I'm just going to talk about a couple of tactics that we used to be successful against the fascists. The necessity of a public-facing, one of those tactics is the necessity of a public-facing, mass-oriented organizational response to fascism and state violence. From the ultra and anarchist milieu, hell-bent on secrecy and elite strike force tactics, we've encountered criticism for insufficient OPSEC, for not blurring faces indiscriminately and hosting organizational meetings fully open to the public. Despite harsh criticisms, warnings, trollings, and threats, we have held the position that good propaganda is essential to build a movement to combat the far right and state violence. The problem isn't infiltration, it's getting enough people in the meeting in the first place. We can absolutely never be successful if anti-fascist organizing is limited to the carefully vetted crew in our immediate circle. Another tactic that we've stayed central to is unflinching and brash confrontation. From our right, self-proclaimed socialists and liberals alike have pleaded pacifism as a means of resistance. Aside from insistence that voting is our best weapon, the moderates have lectured our harsh opposition as aiding in the growth of fascism. Let's be clear, allowing fascism to go unopposed will always be more dangerous than opposing it. Some calling the resistance to fascism bullshit, as if sticking our heads in the sand will make the boogeyman go away. We have maintained our fervent opposition to the fascist worms trying to stand up. The fascists we have had so many encounters with are not dedicated revolutionaries as we are. They're not hard-won to a program, but rather are blandly reacting to toxic masculine trends and propaganda at their local gym. We plan to keep it that way. Remaining focused, another tactic, as a third tactic, remaining focused on the use of our clash with the fascists primarily as a means of recruitment, cadre development, and propaganda. We have no misunderstandings about the limitations of our tiny but mighty organization. We hold no disillusions that the time is now to arm ourselves to start a communist street gang, although it does sound pretty cool. Our confrontational approach—
Wait, what? We hold no disillusions that now is the time to arm ourselves? I'm sorry, what?
Limitations of our tiny but mighty organization. We hold no disillusions that the time is now to arm ourselves to start a communist street gang, although it does sound pretty cool. Our confrontational approach has been proven successful to our stated goals of attracting new membership, developing contacts and relationships, as well as developing ourselves in the fine art of how the hell do you lead a protest. No one joined the DC has any misconceptions of our fighty tendencies. They joined because we present and can explain a militant revolutionary Marxist program. Despite all these successes, we've had a couple of failures. We failed to cohere a consistent and permanent fixture of an anti-fascist coalition, and we're still working to gain enough influence within our local leftist community to do so. As Justin illuminated, the ongoing crisis of capitalism continues. We must expect fascism to continue to rise. We must learn how to avidly oppose their every move as we vie for influence within the working class. And then just a quote from Trotsky to close out. The germ of fascism is endemic in capitalism. A crisis can rise it to epidemic proportions unless drastic—
The germ of fascism is endemic in capitalism.
The working class. And then just a quote from Trotsky to close out. The germ of fascism is endemic in capitalism. A crisis can rise it to epidemic proportions unless drastic countermeasures are applied. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ben. Thank you all.
Well, that looks like the
Charisse and
the end of that session. Does the right have anything similar or better than these left groups? No, not even close. The right not only has nothing better than these groups, the left has hundreds or thousands of decentralized groups like this all over the country. And the right has nothing. The right has nothing. Well, I actually think it's a benefit. Well, I mean, the Groypers might be the closest thing that the right actually has, honestly, because the Groypers are decentralized. The Groypers are also much more strategic than most of the people on the right. So maybe in that respect. Okay. So I know we were originally going to watch 2 more presentations, but we're already 3.5 hours into this stream, and I think that's good. I think that's good for tonight. I think we can watch the other presentations next week. It'll give us a little bit of breathing room. And I think that's what we're going to do, because I can't do any more tonight. I can't do any more. My brain is fried. I can't do any more. It's already been 3.5 hours. Are you taking great risk in educating us? I'm trying to get up to speed. Are you a Nazi or something? I mean, so actually I get harassed far more by the right than I do by the left. Like, the left doesn't like me, but like, they do know about me. They do know who I am. And basically they kind of like ignore me and they block me on things. And they seem to think I don't have a secret account on Blue Sky where I'm following them anyway. So they've all got my main account blocked on Blue Sky. If they find out I'm going to one of their events, they're going to try to kick me out, or they're going to try to prevent me from going, stuff like that. But like, the left doesn't harass me. The right harasses me almost every day of my fucking life. So am I a Nazi? No. Am I a Nazi in the eyes of the left? I mean, probably. But also, again, like, I get called a Nazi and an anti-Semite way more by the anti-woke classical liberals than I do by the leftists. So am I putting myself at risk? I mean, not really when I'm doing virtual stuff. Sometimes I go undercover at events and that would put me at risk. But I'm pretty careful when I go undercover at events. I don't do that very often anymore. Because I can't, because they all know who I am now. Anyway, guys, that's going to wrap it up for Socialism Saturday for this week. I appreciate everyone coming out. If I yelled at you, get over it, because there is a big problem, and the problem is the radical revolutionary far left, and I understand there are other problems too, but we focus on understanding the radical revolutionary far left on this channel. If you would like to come to my re-education anti-communist introduction workshop, that's going to be on Thursday at 8 p.m. You can sign up for free. And this is for total beginners who just want an introductory lesson to the language. It's going to be about 90 minutes long. It will be recorded. So if you can't make it to the live presentation, sign up anyway. and you will get a link to the recording when it's done. I will also have this on demand after it's done, but we will be doing the live show on Thursday. You guys can come and ask questions, stuff like that. It is totally free to sign up. If you want to make a donation, you can, but you don't have to. Please share it with your friends, your family who would be interested in this type of thing. And it'll give a good introduction to here is what the left actually believes. Here is what their language means, so that you can come into something like Socialism Saturday and not say something dumb in my chat where then I have to yell at you and stop the stream and go over to the Substack and play videos and stuff like that. We can just all be on the same page. I understand we have to educate people and bring people along. Sometimes it's really difficult when you first start learning the language of the left, and I'm trying to make it easier so that more people can learn faster. So head over to the Substack. You can find the link to that in this thing right here. If you want to support the work I'm doing on a regular basis, you can sign up for $8 a month, $80 a year over on the Substack, and that is the very best way to fund my work. Thank you to everyone who sent in a super chat tonight, or a Cash App, or a Venmo. I appreciate you guys. Thank you guys for allowing me to do what I do. And now I'm done. I'm done. I have nothing else to say. I am done. I'm going to go enjoy my weekend. I hope you guys all have a great weekend. I hope I will see you guys on Monday for our next live stream at 5 p.m. I stream Monday through Friday at 5 p.m. I stream Saturdays at 6 p.m. Obviously, please mount the like button on the way out the door. Please make sure you subscribe to the channel if you are not already. And now I take my leave, and I'm going to go cry into a pillow again. All right, guys, have a good one. We'll see you soon.
How are you feeling? How long have you been here?
3 months, May 17th.
And what brought you?
That's difficult to answer.
piano for people has eventually resulted in your being here in the hospital.
That's difficult to answer.